What's something that sounds safe but is actually life-threatening? Anesthesia. I feel like people don't have enough respect for how complicated and dangerous it is to put people to sleep. I have patients all the time ask me to put them under for routine procedures that don't require sedation, and I always think to myself that you wouldn't be asking for that if you knew how much training and monitoring and intensive effort it takes to keep someone asleep safely without them stopping breathing. From my friend who works in government studying accidents, duck boats. At Branson, every other year, it seemed that there was a new call to shut them down after an accident. Grain silos. People die every year because they explode with static electricity, and a lot of other ways too, including cave-ins, suffocation, burning, and other scary things. Yep, people don't realize how dangerous tiny particulate matter is. My mind was blown when I saw what design precautions went into designing a factory that made powdered coffee creamer. It's treated like nitroglycerin, and yet you put that crap in your coffee. Interacting with a giant anteater. Their claws can kill a jaguar without much issue. Riding a horse. Those motherfrickers will kill you in a heartbeat. A good friend of mine's an eventer and dressage rider. He doesn't know a single person who rides at his level who hasn't done it with multiple broken ribs. My wife always says that horses are like bicycles that can make bad decisions. Putting out an engine fire with a bucket full of water. Gasoline doesn't actually catch fire very easily. It takes some pretty specific conditions. You can usually extinguish a lit match by dunking it in a cup of gasoline. There's still a small chance it could ignite though, so please don't actually try this. However, when it does ignite, it doesn't burn, it explodes. So, if your engine is burning with a slow and steady fire, it's not the gasoline that's burning, it's the motor oil. And that makes it an oil fire. And you should never, ever add water to an oil fire. This is a great collection of smarty tidbits, all of which we're aware of, but have never considered, all contributing to why you should never douse a flaming engine block in water. I know all of these, but I can guarantee that up until I read this, dumping a bucket on a blazing car would have been my first instinct as well. Getting in a car without a headrest on your seat. It's not just a pillow for comfort, you know? Bison, like the wild, big cow-looking animals. I grew up around them and I see too many tourists in Yellowstone going to take a selfie with one. Those big mother effers will kill you without batting an eye. Telling your HR department how you really feel about your boss. Well, I don't know if this actually sounds safe, but trampolines. People think by putting the netting around them you won't get hurt. Think again. You're one awkward landing from lots of potentially life-changing injuries. I have personally gotten a spontaneous viewing of the inside of an adult foot and ankle because of a trampoline. Ugh. Safes. They'll bloody well crunch your fingers if you're not careful. Trampolines. The Canadian Pediatric Society warns against buying them at all for use by kids and teens. My dad literally made my friend's parents sign waivers before the friends were allowed to be on our trampoline. My dad did this too. A lot of people thought he was crazy, but it always seemed prudent considering how lawsuit-happy the US is. Then there was our experience in a foreign country where a neighbor girl, who was maybe 8 years old, broke her arm falling off our trampoline, and her parents marched her over after getting back from having a cast put on her arm and made her apologize for falling off our trampoline. Then the parents apologized profusely as well, as if their daughter had, in her clumsiness and misfortune, shamed their entire family and all their ancestors. Once my dad recovered from shock, he sent her flowers and a get-well-soon card. Dryer lint. Clear your dryer vents, people. About a month ago, I hired one of those "we clean out the dryer vent lines" people. Super nice guy, really knew what he was talking about. So he tells me it'll be $70 and I give the go-ahead because I'm not in the mood to climb on the roof. Our vents go up and out. And I'd have no idea what I was doing anyway. So he gets to work, super frickin' clean, wasn't yelling on his phone the whole time, takes about an hour and then I pay the guy. He tells me then that his vacuum, a big shop vac, clogged a couple of times and he was sorry for the delay. There was so much lint blocking the vent, it clogged a shop vac multiple times. It was then I realized the previous owner had never cleaned the vents. On the plus side, the dryer works way better now and the house doesn't smell like lint after drying clothing. Oh, and my crap didn't burn down in the middle of the night, killing me and my family, so that's a plus. Whenever I'm camping and I need to absolutely start a fire with a single spark, I use dryer lint. That stuff is supremely, dangerously flammable. Farming. Everyone thinks about the bucolic pastures, pretty red barns, and cute little critters running around, but farming is the 6th most dangerous occupation in the United States. higher than law enforcement, firefighters, power line workers, and iron workers. Most of the farming deaths involve accidents with machinery, but grain storage deaths are pretty high as well. If a farmer falls into, say, a bin of canola, he sinks to the bottom and suffocates fairly quickly, as well as the unfortunate ones that fall into pig manure pits and drown in liquid crap. Farm animals also kill a lot of farmers too, because a 180-pound man doesn't have good odds going up against a 12,000-pound cow. Plus, the fact that no one talks about is the mental health-related deaths. Farming is incredibly stressful, and self-deletion in the farming community is rising steadily. One of the worst things is how isolating a lot of the work can feel, especially outside of the harvests, and just how isolated everything is in general. Really, it makes it hard to react during any sort of emergency. I mean, my grandpa died at 61 from an otherwise treatable heart problem because it took 40 minutes just for an ambulance to get all the way out to him. Farming's also a top 10 profession for deciding you don't want to be alive anymore and acting on it. Not only is it often isolating, but you also have the pressures of being a small business owner, along with what's often the pressure of generations of family expectation. It's bad enough having a small social circle or having to sell your business, but it's worse when you have that and also you're talking about selling something that's been in your family for 100 years. These aren't issues that I'm personally facing, but they're common in the AG industry. Yes, it's an industry just like any other field of work. Mouthing off to a stranger. You never know how crazy they might be, what they're going through, or if they have a weapon. Just bite your tongue. Cleaning a cat's litter box with bleach. Don't mix ammonia and bleach. You'll be committing a war crime. The main thing to remember is never mix bleach with anything besides water. If I'm honest, fair rides. You'd think it'd be safe. It's surrounded by a lot of people, so if anything were to happen, help would be there straight away. And there's all these safety precautions. But the amount of things that have gone wrong way too often is scary. When I was a teenager, I got stuck on Witch's Wheel at a fair. It shorted out and got stuck on the on position. It ran for about half an hour, maybe 45 minutes before they figured out what was wrong and got it to stop. It ran at full tilt at a 45-degree angle for the entire time. I've never been sicker in my life. My friends took me home and I couldn't walk to my front door. I lay in the backyard chucking up. My mother yelled at me because she thought it was because I was drunk, but my friends explained what happened. I'll never ride another spinny ride ever again. Screw that. Gonna be honest, this is probably never going to stop the narrator from getting on a fair ride. The chances of being on the one time where it crashes are so incredibly small, especially at a fair that undergoes regular inspections. And good luck trying to tell your kids not to get on them. I feel like all you can really do is metaphorically and literally sit back and enjoy the ride. Boating. I'm a boat mechanic, but I didn't have much boating experience before I started working on them, and I was pretty caught off guard to discover how dangerous it can be. Everyone thinks of boating as this idyllic family activity, and it usually is, but a staggering amount of crap can go wrong on the water and leave you stranded or worse. There are submerged objects like rock formations and logs that can cause you to get ejected or sink your boat. It's fairly easy to forget a plug and sink your boat. That happens frequently. Most boat owners have no idea how to operate a boat safely or even competently. It's trickier than you might think. It takes some experience and technique. Also, heavy drinking among boaters is rampant. People often don't secure their trailer correctly to the tow vehicle, not latched, wrong ball size hitch, unsecured or improperly secured chains, stuff like that. People don't service their trailers, wheels fall off from a lack of grease. I'd conservatively estimate that 30% of trailer brakes just don't work, and the percentage goes up logarithmically with the age of the trailer. Give boat trailers a wide berth on the freeway. Often people don't follow basic safety like life jackets and kill lanyards. You can hit a big wake or wave and get knocked away from the controls, and your boat is now a self-guided missile. If you're swimming behind a running boat, you can pass out from the fumes and drown. You can get chopped to bits by the propeller. You can get hit by a boat being driven by a drunk, inexperienced, or incompetent person. A fuel leak can cause a buildup of fumes in the bilge that gets ignited by engine electronics. The list goes on and on. Growing up, we had a boat. One time we were out with some friends. My dad couldn't come this time. We were prepping for the next skier and wakeboarder when my mom noticed something was wrong. She asked my brother and I to check something, and when we did, she definitely got a whole lot more concerned. The friends were oblivious to any troubles and asked who was next. My mom said, "No one, because we're sinking." We promptly raced back to the dock where we put the boat on the trailer as fast as we could. Turns out we forgot the drain plug and we were taking on water. I still remember that over 20 years later. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Four-wheelers. So many injuries and deaths from people who don't respect what they can do and just how easy they are to topple. My sister passed some years back at 19 years old on a four-wheeler she had just purchased. She was with friends who were also riding their own. She had a girlfriend on the back of hers who was a little heavy-set. In order to get to the area, they had to cross a small drainage ditch, maybe 4 or 5 feet from the bank to the bottom of it. It was completely dry. She attempted to go up it, straight ahead with the girl on the back. And my understanding is that when she gassed it, the front tires left the ground, flipping it over backwards on top of them. The passenger was thrown to the side, but my sister held on, probably out of shock, and the weight of the entire thing came down on her head via the handlebars, pinching her between that and the concrete. By the time any help arrived, she was already gone. If you take anything from this story or the hundreds of others that you're likely to read about in your life, wear a damn helmet. Anything can happen in the blink of an eye. Walking up or down stairs. Literally every time I trip a little going down the stairs, I think to myself, in another dimension, that was how I died. Falling down stairs is scary though. Using a dull knife rather than a sharp one. That applies to razors as well in my experience. Try using the same blade for over a year? Well, too bad, because hairs either aren't coming off or your entire face is. My rule of thumb is that whenever I'm on the highway and I see a trailer or some oversized cargo tied to a flatbed or latched to a truck, think of the stupidest failure of a human being you've ever met. Now imagine that person is the one who secured that cargo to the vehicle. Drive accordingly. Sleeping. Many people have sleep apnea who just aren't overweight, old, they smoke, or unhealthy. Snoring is the big indicator. You stop breathing dozens of times an hour through the night until your body responds by waking you up and repeats it again. Not only does it slowly starve your brain of oxygen and put tremendous strain on your heart over the years, but it can cause such excessive drowsiness and sleep deprivation you can fall asleep while driving. If your partner says you snore a lot or you're always tired despite getting regular sleep, get it checked out. Regular being sleepy when driving isn't normal, nor is always falling asleep when you sit and watch TV, read, or just relax for a few minutes. I have severe sleep apnea and snored like crazy since I was a child and had several inconclusive sleep studies. I wasn't diagnosed until I was 20 and went to the dentist. They put me on laughing gas and I promptly fell asleep. The second I woke up, my dentist looked me dead in the eye and told me, "If you don't get treatment for your sleep apnea, you'll be dead by 30. After having a sleep study, I found out I was having 55 interruptions, periods of 10 seconds or more without breathing, per hour, with my average interruption lasting 27 seconds. I was exhausted all the time and my quality of life was terrible. Now I have the energy to do the things I love doing. I'm very thankful that I fell asleep in that dentist's chair. Don't put up your feet on the dashboard of a car when you're riding in the front seat. It doesn't matter if you're wearing a seatbelt, your kneecaps are going to go through your skull if you get into an accident. I used to do that all the time when I was younger, now I want to scream every time I see it. Holding your breath while scuba diving. If you ascend from depth with your airways closed while breathing compressed air, you're at extreme risk of rupturing a lung, damaging your alveoli, or suffering from other lung overexpansion injuries. This is because when you take a breath under significant external pressure, the air you breathe in is much more dense, and so your lungs can get more of it per breath. But as the pressure acting on you lessens, the air in your lungs expands. And if your airways aren't open, your lungs will be damaged from the overpressure. It's an easily avoidable risk, but if ignored, the consequences are often deadly or at least permanently damaging. Making pottery. Let me explain. The colors are all from metals, and except for iron, they're all toxic to some degree. The best glazes set off a Geiger counter. Silicosis, emphysema, and cancer are occupational hazards from the dust. The ingredient that makes pottery glazes dishwasher safe is wollastonite, which is actually more dangerous than asbestos. You're dealing with something that can make an airtight seal, contains water, and is going to be heated. Pottery exploding in the firing process is a common problem. Speaking of firing, we're talking high temperatures. You can light a cigarette by tapping the tip on the outside of the kiln while it's running. That's already assuming you're using insulating bricks. Toxic gases can come from the pottery during firing, and most kilns are indoors. Firing with gas or wood burners can pose a carbon monoxide hazard. All of the bending over and physical work can lead to arthritis. Making and firing pottery improperly can poison the end user. Storage of toxic and radioactive and carcinogenic materials is usually subpar. Moderately old buildings. I became an asbestos inspector for my job, and let me tell you, the more you find out about asbestos and what we put it in, the less time you want to spend in any structure built prior to the mid-80s. And that's just asbestos. Not even going to go into the other hazardous building materials like lead. Asbestos was truly an almost miraculous building material for its time. It's cheap to acquire, and adding it to almost any construction material made that material better at its job. It's also insidiously easy to get complacent around it. Unless you're breathing insane amounts of it, you wouldn't know it's there unless you had that knowledge beforehand. It doesn't smell, you won't feel queasy or nauseous, it just seems like normal dust with the caveat that if you breathe too much or are just unlucky, there's a chance that the latter half of your life will be spent in absolute misery if one of the severe medical conditions associated with asbestos doesn't just kill you within a few years of showing symptoms. The human race can always rely on the universe to humble us whenever we discover one of these miracle solutions like asbestos that seems able to do everything. There'll be more to come too. So I'm looking forward to finding out that all of our healthy plant protein products eventually turn us into raving mad cannibals or something like that. Driving. Seriously. A news story near me lately shook me, even though I know it's not the first time it had happened. But a driver swerved into oncoming traffic and got into a head-on accident. There was only one guy in either car, but they both died. It makes me sick that you can do everything right while driving and just get killed by someone else at any time. Flushable wipes. They can actually clump together into big balls that clog your drain or worse, cause issues for the town plumbing way down the line. We had a lift station cleaned out. In the bottom of the 30-foot silo there was a cake made of wipes and other sanitary products. This cake was so dense that a person could stand on it. This was obstructing the pumps at the bottom of the silos, which, in a worst-case scenario, would overflow into the adjacent river. Stop flushing stupid stuff down the frickin' toilet. People with anxiety should really not be listening to this video. Yeah, thanks, but I'm already in too deep. The safety dance. But don't let me dissuade you. You can dance if you want to. You can also leave your friends behind. Leaving the house and staying in the house. Pregnancy. A woman's body is designed to perform this function, and yet you, and the thing you're growing inside of you, can die or kill you. Both my first son and I wouldn't have lived if it wasn't for medicine and C-sections. Driving. Doing 100 down the freeway in a metal can powered by a highly flammable combustion liquid, and mother frickers can still have the nerve to cut you off. All of these are really reminding me of the Lonely Island song, YOLO. Garage door springs. I remember there was a conversation about what's the most dangerous DIY product you could attempt yourself, and garage door springs were the number one, followed by using a chainsaw. Tons of pros on there, and everyone agreed. I view my garage door spring with caution now. It's a coiled killer. Earbuds. They'll put you at risk of early onset hearing loss. The way your 80-year-old grandpa yells, "What did you say?" at 150 decibels is going to be us at 40 because we can't stop blasting Sicko Mode by Travis Scott at full volume straight into our ears. Retractable dog leashes that don't give you that much control and can potentially cause serious injuries to you or your dog. The eyes of potatoes, if they've sprouted any green, can be poisonous. Potatoes are members of the nightshade family, and they're the most common cause of solanine poisoning in humans. Their green stuff can cause lesser versions of all the same symptoms of the nightshade family, including paralysis of the central nervous system, and can even cause death. Use that weird thing on your peeler to gouge out those eyes. Opening up a CRT monitor or TV. Those old TVs contain a capacitor that can hold a lethal charge even after being unplugged for about a month. I've never experienced the shock, but when I was studying the CompTIA A+ certificate manual, basically the whole chapter on monitor repairs summed up to hire someone who knows what they're doing or you will be electrocuted. Alcohol. What's messed up about alcoholism, among other things, is how socially acceptable it is to get rat-faced every night. So as long as you're holding down a job and not getting multiple DUIs, a lot of people act like it's no big deal. Plus there's all those jokes you see from parents about mummy needs her wine while holding up those big novelty glasses. Hoda and Kathy Lee used to drink on the Today Show every morning at like 10 a.m. Some workplaces have mandatory company outings that really just entail going to a bar and trying to talk about anything besides work. I'm an alcoholic and it doesn't bother me to be around others drinking, but for some it can make sobriety really difficult. Living with your parents. I had to move back in for various reasons and my mental health and well-being are declining fast. Replacing or adjusting garage door springs. This one doesn't sound perfectly safe, I admit, but the ratio of perceived safety to actual holy crap this can end super badly is definitely there. Being a shop owner in Los Angeles. Invading Russia in the winter. Acetaminophen or Tylenol. Great, but the dose makes the poison, especially dangerous for hard drinkers and alcoholics. Breaking wind after eating Taco Bell. As someone who works in emergency medical services, you'd be surprised by the amount of people who think it's safer to not wear a seatbelt than to wear one. Biking in car-friendly cities. Opening a box with a box cutter. Someone I know works at a place where they have a "It's been this many days since our last accident" sign, and after about 184 days with no accidents, they had to change it to 0 days because someone was careless with a box cutter. I say this all the time, but pressure washing. Knew a guy in college with a younger brother he loved to pick on, send him to the hospital after hydroblasting him with 400 psi. Pressure washers can be commonly found and started by kids, and I honestly don't know why people don't recognize how dangerous they are. What amazing comebacks have you heard come out of nowhere? In 10th grade, my friend called a classmate illiterate. He replied, "Joke's on you, I don't know what that means." I think about that a lot. Story I heard from a parent-teacher conference. A mum got back a report for her son's school stating that he was illiterate. Her response, "That's a dirty lie. His dad and I were married 2 days before he was born." My grandma was playing bridge with her friends and the subject of age did come up. My grandma said she was 63 and the next woman said, "A lady doesn't discuss such things." So my grandma said, "Oh, don't worry, dear. I'm sure when I'm your age I won't want to discuss it either." Damn, I've noticed that old people can throw shade that we can only marvel at. They've got this sweet experience that can only come with age and a lifetime to hone their skills. There was this guy at a frat party that whipped out his pecker in front of this girl and asked her what it looked like. Without missing a beat, she replied, "It looks like a male member, only smaller." My mother-in-law is 4'11". She once asked a 6'5" coworker of mine if he played basketball, to which he replied, "No, do you play miniature golf?" My friend is 4'10". A larger man at work likes to constantly point this out to her, as if she's in some way unaware of it. One day she got sick of him. It went something along the lines of him saying, "Well, at least I'm not a short ass like you are," and her saying, "At least I'm not fat like you." Well, that's going a bit far, isn't it? I don't see how. I can't do anything about being short. You could lose weight. I had this one teacher who would say, "In a battle of wits, you have come unarmed." When he said that to one of the students in my class one day, the student promptly responded, "Then I challenge you to a battle of hair." I should note that the teacher was bald. I feel like I'm just experiencing all of the cut content from the sword insult fighting in the Monkey Island games. Keep it coming, people. My team leader said at work, "Have you tried playing dad to 40 kids?" referring to us regular employees as the children. My coworker, without missing a beat, replies, "Have you ever had a deadbeat dad?" I was dying. "Your mom is a lady of the night. Well, at least mine charges." A friend in 6th grade came to school with a black eye. Everyone was naturally asking what had happened. This girl said, "Your white trash dad probably beat you," in front of everybody. He responded with, "At least I have a dad." Her dad had self-deleted 2 years earlier. I'd say he took it too far, but it was very quick and burned her like 1,000 suns. When Jimmy Carr began in one of his sets by saying, "First time I was ever in bed with someone," and a girl in the crowd said, "You mean yesterday?" The crowd went wild with laughter, and he waited for everyone to quiet down and then with perfect timing said, "I'm glad you remember." Years ago, I was out drinking with friends and some people we'd just met, including a guy I was interested in. There was a lot of banter flying back and forth. In an effort to seem cool to our new acquaintances, I threw a lame, slightly personal insult to my friend across the table. I don't even really remember what it was, as it was so long ago, but probably along the lines of your mum joke. Despite obviously hearing what I'd said, he looked directly at me and said in a non-aggressive way, "Sorry, I couldn't hear you. What was that you said?" Feeling a little stupid at this point, I repeated it. Once again, louder, and our company was paying attention now, he said, "Oh, I didn't get it that time either. What did you say?" At that point, the table had fallen silent, and with all eyes on me, I felt so small and embarrassed and just mumbled, "Never mind," into my drink. Looking back, he clearly knew exactly what he was doing, and I've used this tactic since. It's so simple yet effective and guaranteed to make your opponent want the earth to swallow them whole. I wasn't there, but my brother overheard two kids on a bus playing a game where you can see who can yell the words for male member the loudest. It got too loud and the bus driver, who was a woman in maybe her 50s, out of the blue yelled, "Sounds like it's coming from someone who wishes they had one." The entire bus erupted in laughter. President Calvin Coolidge was famously taciturn. His campaign train stopped briefly in one town. A woman called out, "Mr. Coolidge, my husband bet me I couldn't get you to say more than 2 words. Now, what do you say to that?" The train lurched into motion. "You lose," he said. My buddy and I used to hang out with a guy that always smelled. He barely showered, even before work, and we would always give him crap for that. One day, my buddy was driving and he let a toot go. It didn't smell that bad, but the guy who smelled made a comment along the lines of, "God, even your toots are weak." And my buddy, without hesitation, says, "It's because your body odor was covering it up." I had a friend who was adopted. She was actually a huge bully and made fun of me because my mum worked 3 jobs and so she was never home. One day she was in bully mode and says, "At least my mum loves me enough to stay home and be with me." And I clapped back with, "At least my real mum loved me enough to keep me." She then smacked me. She got in trouble and so did I, but she never made fun of my mum for not being home again. This guy brought a new lunchbox to school and was being made fun of by this girl in a wheelchair. She told him, "Nice lunchbox," to which he immediately responded, "Nice legs." Back in high school, I was president of the role-playing game club. It was a real shell organization. We just existed so that on Fridays we could play in an English teacher's classroom after school, and we needed to keep the bathrooms open. Summer came and something like 3/4 of the squad were sentenced to summer school. So on most days we'd get together to play some D&D on the abandoned lunch quad until it got dark. One day these 2 girls came up to the group. Bear in mind, we're playing D&D, so we largely have no ability to converse with females. And these are your more adventurous girls from school, but they were very chill, just casually talking with us about what we were doing and all that jazz. One of them started playing with my bike helmet. It was old as hell, and the glue holding the inner styrofoam to the outer shell was all gone, and they'd come apart if you grabbed one and not the other. So this girl picks up my helmet to ask about all the ski stickers on it, and the foam fell out. "Your helmet sucks wang," she declared. It was an instinct, my reaction, born of long nights chugging energy drinks and rolling dice. Maybe your head just sucks wang. Now, if this interaction happened between my buddy Nikolai and I, that would have been funny, but she just got offended and left. I once read that Margot Fontaine was having dinner with Jean Harlow and a group of other people, and Jean kept calling her Margot, pronouncing the T. Fontaine said, "No, Jean, the T is silent, as in Harlow." 1930s savagery right there. A male colleague was once telling us how he fell asleep during oral fun times the night before. My other colleague Ed immediately asked, "What woke you up, the stiff eggplant hitting the back of your throat?" "No need to call me Sir, Professor." Were you born like this, or did you follow a course? A bully calls an idiot the C word. The idiot says, "You are what you eat." The bully laughs. The idiot says, "I guess that makes you a butthole." Bully picked on a quiet kid, and the quiet kid smashed his face to a wall. You know, I'm not sure if this latest one quite matches the others, but maybe it was his comeback in life after a couple of years of quietly taking crap. So we'll use it. And now for some historical burns from a former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Winston Churchill to Lady Astor after she called him disgustingly drunk. "I may be drunk, miss, but in the morning I will be sober, and you will still be ugly." Also from Winston Churchill and some other woman, "If you were my husband, I'd poison your tea, and madam, if you were my wife, I'd drink it." Also, for premiere of his play Pygmalion, George Bernard Shaw sent Churchill tickets with a note, "Bring a friend if you have one." And Churchill's response was, "Can't make opening night, but will come second night if you have one." A guy stole my friend's soccer ball one day. We were 13, so I watched as she went up to get it back. He said he wouldn't give it back unless she gave him a BJ. She responded with, "Sorry, I can't. My mum told me not to put small things in my mouth." She then snatched the soccer ball and walked away happily. Hey, let's keep my mom out of this, and I'll keep out of your mom. A mean girl on the school bus said to me, "You're one of the ugliest dudes I've ever seen, Joe." And I said, "Well, Tara, looks like we have something in common." The whole bus started cracking up laughing, and she was really angry. Never said a word to me ever again. My brother and I were about 12 and 10 respectively, and we went skiing in Vermont for the day. But we didn't really ski, and we certainly didn't have any nice gear or clothes, so my brother wore the only snowsuit he had, which was a one-piece, and it was brown, like dark brown, and he put on his brown hat. We were gliding down a pass that was under the ski lift when I fell down and my brother stopped right next to me to help me up. The guy on the lift above me looks down at us and screams, "Hey, kid in brown, you look like a brown piece of crap." And my brother, with perfect comedic timing, says in his high-pitched, prepubescent voice, "That's what your mother said when I pulled my wang out of her butt." I was hysterical. I couldn't stop laughing, and everyone that was on the lift started laughing too. And my brother, of course, took off his brown mittens to give him the finger. I'm still laughing. My brother had a wart on his hand and a little bottle of medicine that he was using, I don't know, a few times a day maybe. My friend Julie was over, and the three of us were sitting and chatting. My brother was casually tossing the little bottle in the air and catching it. Julie, who was, let's be honest, a snobby jerk, said, "Gee, I wish I were as cool as you with your wart medicine." And my brother said, very seriously, "I'm sorry, Julie, I'd be happy to share with you, but there isn't enough to cover your entire head." Kumail Nanjiani had a wicked comeback while reading mean tweets. The tweet said, "Is Kumail Nanjiani's wang multiple colors?" And Kumail said, "Yes, every color of your mum's lipstick. I just about died." A friend of mine was welding, and this D-bag at his workplace says while overlooking it, "That's gonna come out messed up." And my friend replied immediately with, "That's what the doctor told your parents at the first ultrasound." Huh? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Junior high, I had a science teacher that looking back was pretty cool. Used to let everyone give him a hard time and was pretty goofy and such. I don't remember what prompted it, but one of my classmates asked a question and he answered, "Don't set unrealistic expectations." And my friend, not the person who asked the initial question, jumped in, "Then why are you teaching?" Student is whispering to a classmate while teacher is speaking, 6th grade math, and the teacher says, "Am I interrupting something?" And the student says, "Yeah, but don't let it happen again. Epic." Yeah, well, the jerk store called and they're running out of you. When I was younger, me and my brother were having a roast battle of sorts to say the most messed up, funny stuff that we could say to each other. My mum walked in and says, "Oh look, a battle of wits between unarmed opponents." Needless to say, that put a swift end to our attempted humor. A guy who played in the samurai faction in For Honor came in talking crap about the knight players, and one of them responded with, "Keep it up and the next king won't be decided by the sword in the stone, but by who can pull my boot from your butt." I still laugh at it to this day, even though I haven't played For Honor in forever. One of my brothers said, "Stop talking crap." The other one said, "Everything that comes out of my mouth is sweet." Yeah, no wonder you're fat as frick. Whenever someone says, "F you," I say, "Pay me." It stumps a lot of people, sometimes resulting with an, "Ugh, F you." So I say again, "Well, pay me." One time I was at Geeks Who Drink Bar trivia here in Dallas. Me and the other two people on my team were in 3rd place during the 6th round score announcement. The first place team had a full group of 5 or 6 people. After the trivia master announced the scores, I drunkenly shouted out loud, "Yeah, but how many people are on their team?" And the trivia master overheard me, and he instantly said in the microphone so everyone could hear, "Enough to kick your fricking butt." It was such a good retort that I wasn't even mad, and he was right. Look man, trivia masters at these things are often as not stand-up comedians who are doing extra gigs to make ends meet. Going toe-to-toe with one of them is not for the faint-hearted, and I'm not surprised you got burned. One of my friends got into an argument at a bar with someone else, and the guy walked up to him and tried choking him out with one hand from the front. My friend just smiled the whole time, and when a bouncer grabbed the guy choking my friend and was escorting him out, my friend yelled, "I've banged chicks who choked me harder than that." I was really proud of him. Last day of 5th grade, a short, chubby kid was going around the teacherless classroom giving out quick roasts. He gets to me and says, "Hey you, your head looks like a basketball." I quickly replied, "It looks like you ate a basketball." I'm still very proud of 5th grade me. The guy says, "You effed up, John." And John says, I only F up when my wife's on top. I know you are, but what am I? I can't tell you, 'cause you'll cry. Adlai Stevenson ran for president twice in 1952 and 1956. A woman gushed at him, "Mr. Stevenson, you have the vote of every thinking American." And his reply was, "Sorry, ma'am, I need a majority." Adlai was quite witty and a true statesman. My folks were yellow dog Democrats who would vote for a yellow dog on the ballot instead of a Republican, and told me how cool he was. When my bro was about 10, it used to be my job to take him for his Saturday morning soccer game. It was run by his school and they'd play other school groups. It sucked as a teenager, but I mostly just hung out with the other mums and cut up oranges and stuff. I've got to mention that I live in a pretty white area, and my brother and I look absolutely and unapologetically Muslim, because we are. Anyway, my little brother's team came off the field after absolutely thrashing another school. The school is in a pretty rural, read racist, area, and one of the kids ran up to my bro and screams, "You learn how to play like that in terror bombing camp?" And my bro picks up an orange and replies, "Yeah, we practice against the skinhead youth on Sundays. See you there." And he threw an orange at him. Sophomore year of high school, 1995. A close friend of mine had just gotten her first of what would be eventually many tattoos, a rubber ducky on her belly, just beside her navel. We had a church camp thing that weekend and she tried to keep it covered as much as she could, but she had to keep applying Neosporin and such, so we kept ducking out to hallways and spare conference rooms at this massive church, so she could take care of business and I'd look out for any adults who might yell at her for the tattoo. So maybe the 5th time we went out to get her tattoo some air, these girls from another church sneak out and follow us. Picture the cast of Mean Girls. Wealthy, snotty, preppy, pretty, and totally up their own butts. They're all blonde, thin as rails, and dressed like a Land's End advertisement. My friend and I were also skinny blondes, but she dressed grunge and I was into the skater, raver look at the same time. A total poser, as I didn't do substances, but I had a pixie haircut with a green streak in it, and I wore little boys' polo shirts and enormous pants. Not the type these girls thought of as cool. Anyway, the lead blonde clone walks up to us and asks in her flat valley girl voice, "Oh my god, is that a tattoo?" And my friend goes, "Yep," as she's dabbing little spots of blood away and applying ointment. And the girl goes, "Is it real?" And my friend goes, "No, it's fake, and so is the blood." Blondie catches her sarcasm, amazingly enough, and stares hard at my friend's belly for a moment and asks, "What's going to happen when you get fat?" And without missing a beat or even looking up from what she's doing, my friend said, "I don't know. What happened when you got fat?" The girl was open-mouthed for a second and then lamely called her the B-word and stalked off with her entourage. But I could tell my friend got to her. She was the comeback goddess. She always knew exactly what to say to level a person who crossed her. My brother brought his college girlfriend home with him during Christmas break. Dad's pulling a double shift, and my mum ran off to France with some fancy European guy, and I'm teabagging my classmates on Halo 3. The two of them get bored just sitting there on the couch since I'm not much of a conversationalist. Anyway, one thing leads to another, if you know what I mean. Unfortunately for them, my dad's boss had a Scrooge epiphany and sent them home early for Christmas Eve. So Dad walks in carrying this giant Christmas ham to surprise us with, only to find his eldest son doing something pretty specific with his girlfriend's butt. Dad goes full Leviticus on my bro and declares the butt an unclean organ, and then said it was detestable to practice sodomy in front of me. I tried to defend my brother with the old, "I've seen worse on the internet" defense, but Dad just talked over me. The disrespect teed off my brother and he tore into my dad. Maybe if you ate Mom's booty more, she wouldn't have left us. Brutal perhaps, but it did shut down Dad's biblical rant. Merry Christmas, everyone. When we were kids, my older brother and I were arguing about some crap and I said, "I knew that before you were born." Without hesitation, he replied, "Did you have a library in your part of Dad's ball bag?" And we both wet ourselves laughing for 5 minutes. There was once a kid in 7th grade that was at least a foot shorter than me, and he was trying to roast me. At one point, I just interrupted him and said, "Hey, at least I can go on the fricking Ferris wheel." I and those around me got a kick out of that. "Your mom's a lesbian." "Yeah, with your mom." Anytime a guy says he has a big wang, I tell him, "Spit it out, it isn't yours." My uncle, a genial old man with a beard sitting in a pub. A younger guy looks at him and says, "What the frick are you looking at?" My uncle says, "Oh, sorry, sonny. If you don't know what the frick you are, I'm afraid I can't help you." The younger guy looked puzzled for a moment and then decided it wasn't worth the intellectual headache of pushing it further. Guys, many people in the comments of these stories are pointing out that a lot of the elderly have razor-sharp wits and do not give an F. Don't go up against them unless you're bringing your insult A-game. I've been rejected by better people than you. My dad once told my 17-year-old brother, "You're just mad because the best part of you ran down the crack of your mum's butt." This loser walked into class. The teacher said, "You're late," and he instantly said, "A wizard is never late, nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to." He was lucky the teacher knew Lord of the Rings. A slightly chubby girl told my friend, who admittedly had a rather bad neckbeard, that he should shave. Without skipping a beat, he told her she should shave the pounds off. A guy with no chin said, "At least I don't have two chins." And the guy with two chins said, "At least I have one." Did I stutter? Yes. Then you heard me twice. My ex-boss was in a bar in Onslow watching England valiantly lose in heartbreaking style in a soccer tournament to Germany yet again, when he got accidentally bumped into by a German fan as he was reversing without due attention. "Oh, sorry," apologized the German chap. "For which world war?" quips Nick. Apparently the punch came out of nowhere. I worked in a paint shop for a while and got really good at guy talk. One day, while walking into the office, one of the guys started making fun of me because I wash my hands. Something along the lines of, "Don't forget to wash your hands, little lady." I'm a guy. And I replied without even thinking, "Yeah, no, I don't want to give your girl a yeasty." My short friend made some snarky comment and others were gassing her up. She said, "Yeah, I know how to throw shade." And then I said, "What do you know about throwing shade? You're not even tall enough to cast a shadow." And that's the comeback I'm the most proud of. My sister was being a total witch to me, like attacking my weight, my career, my grades. After being fed up, I left the room, and before passing through the door, I turned and said, "Jon Snow comes back to life next episode," and I left. She was catching up with the show. Can you get away with mouthing off to a cop? Alright, can you say your alphabet to J for me? Oh sure, which one of you guys is J? I'd just picked up my paycheck back in high school and must have been 16 or 17 and a fairly new driver. An officer pulled me over for not pulling completely into the road, going from driveway to driveway, like I drove 10 feet on the wrong side, but there was no traffic. The officer said, "Can you even afford a ticket as a new driver?" And my dumb butt said, "I did just pick up my paycheck." It wasn't until afterwards that I thought more along the lines of having demerit points on my license is more than likely what he meant. He let me go with a warning. Driving through Kansas City and I got pulled over. I was wearing a twins cap. The cop said something about being ready to give me a warning, but then he saw my cap, and I said, "Hey, it's not like the Royals and Twins have been good at the same time." He said he's actually a Cubs fan, and I couldn't stop myself from saying, "Oh, I'm sorry." He laughed and gave me a warning. We were in a car park just off the motorway in a Toyota MR2. The police pulled in and got out of their car. One of the officers put his hand on the bonnet, the hood, of the MR2 and said, "Bonnet's a bit hot. Been ragging it, have we?" And I replied, "Funny that, mate. It's rear engine." The second officer found it hilarious, and the first looked incredibly embarrassed. I was waiting to buy something at a store, but there was no one behind the cash register. There was already a lady in front of me who seemed to have been waiting for a while. We rang the little bell a couple of times, but no one appeared. After waiting some time, I joked, "We should just steal this stuff. That will get their attention." The lady in front of me responded by showing me her dry cleaning bag, full of police uniforms. So I said the first thing that came to mind. "You have to get your uniforms dry cleaned? Does that get expensive?" And we ended up having a fairly cheerful conversation about dress codes and employee perks, and the laundry facilities in different neighborhood apartment buildings, and the turnaround time of different neighborhood dry cleaners until the cashier finally showed up. That sounds exactly like my luck. Of all the people to make that joke to, it had to be a gosh darn law enforcer. Luckily, this lady sounded chill. Got pulled over on my motorcycle. The cop said, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Because I wasn't wearing my seatbelt?" He got a chuckle, and I only got a warning. The next cop didn't find it nearly as amusing. Cop said to me, "Were you eating an apple while driving?" "Can't I eat while I drive?" "No. But I can smoke, right?" "Yeah." Then I was smoking the apple. I once pulled myself over after I thought I blew through a red light, since there was a cop right there. I was a new driver, saw him and freaked out. He asked me why he shouldn't write me a ticket, and I told him, "I really don't want you to?" Got off with a warning. I work nights, so the cops will occasionally cruise through our parking lot in the middle of nowhere and just check things out. I was outside on my break smoking and playing Jetpack Joyride when they lowered their window. "What are you doing here at this time of night?" "My fricking job. Why are you out here at this time of night?" "Our fricking jobs. Have a nice night." "You too." Montreal cops are nice despite their silly trousers. He asked me if I had a dead body in my back seat. I said, "Oh, totally. You want to meet him? He's kinda shy." He laughed and told his partner, "He said totally," took my license, sat in their car for a minute and then drove up next to me, handed me my cards from their window and drove off. I later realized that a coat and hat were on top of a mess in my back seat and actually could have looked like a dead body. A cop pulled me and my friend over when we were both 17. Pretty sure he just saw a couple of teens in a car late at night and figured we were up to no good. That being said, we had a lot of green herb in the car, in a bag. The cop came over and said, "So, you have anything illegal in your car?" "Just my good looks," I reply. The cop laughs and lets us leave. My heart just about gave out, it was beating so fast. He told me how much over the limit I was going, and I said, "Well, you looked bored sitting there, so I figured I'd give you something to do." He laughed and let me off the whole thing with a warning. I was flying back from Europe once. At the Brussels airport, I brought a jar of mustard in duty-free. They sealed it in the special bag. Put it in my carry-on. Got it through customs, no problem. Bringing it back through TSA in the US, at a major international airport, it gets confiscated. It's in a sealed jar, in a sealed bag, having clearly been brought at an airport and just brought through an international border. The TSA guy confiscates it. I told him to keep saving the country one jar of mustard at a time. Yeah, TSA customs are stupid. When I was 13 and coming back from vacation in England, I had some guy completely flip his crap, screaming at me because I dared to pull my old iPod out of my pocket for 2 seconds to check the time, not realizing that was a problem. I got yelled at by some grouchy middle-aged guy and he went on for a solid minute over it. Like, is it really necessary to flip crap on some kid over something so stupid? Just say, "Hey, that's not allowed. Put it away." My Uber driver was telling me a story about how he got pulled over for going 90 on a sharp turn. The radar was obviously malfunctioning because he would either have flipped his car or slid off the road if he was going that fast. The motorcycle cop was too stupid to figure this out and threatened to arrest him, so he said, "What are you gonna do? Put me on the back of your bike?" The cop got super teed off and actually arrested him and gave him the ticket, and the cop lied about where he clocked the Uber driver. Luckily, the Uber driver had a dash cam and got the ticket and all other charges dropped. But damn, the gall and stupidity of that cop make me feel sorry for whoever else has to deal with him. I don't know what happened to the cop, guys. Yeah, lying under oath is bad, but I don't know what happened to anyone that isn't the Uber driver. In college, I once thanked a cop for not being a jerk about it, like most officers are, after getting ticketed. He wrote it all down, and the judge repeated that to me when I fought the ticket in court. She was clearly amused, and I got out of the ticket. He asked why I was going 52 in a 35, and I told him, general lack of awareness. This didn't get me out of the ticket, but it gave the cop a pretty good laugh. Years ago, during a heavy substance-fueled bender at a London festival, I walked up to some policemen and said, "Guess what I'm on?" They smirked and told me to move along. I had one ask, "You were speeding, so why shouldn't I give you a citation?" I said, "I'm not worth the paperwork." He gave me a little half-smile for a brief second before his face returned to the stern face that he had the entire encounter. My friend got pulled over doing 20 over. We were college kids at the time. Officer walks over to the window and does his normal, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" routine, and then turns to me when it's all done and asks, "So, should I give your friend here a ticket?" And with a smile I said, "Yes, sir, he most likely deserves it." The cop laughed, smiled, and walked away. Well, you got off the ticket. I do wonder if you got a vicious punch in the arm as soon as the cop pulled away, though. My birthday 3 years ago. I was crossing the street to my car, and suddenly 2 squad cars pull up, each with 2 officers in them for some reason. As I was unlocking my car, all 4 got out of their cars and approached me. One of them asked me to please stop and walk over to them. I did. He then asked if I knew why they were stopping me, to which I replied, "I'm assuming you're strippers." "Excuse me?" "Yeah, you must be strippers. It's my birthday and 4 suspiciously good-looking police officers just stopped me for absolutely no reason. 3 of them laughed and 1 did not. I then had to wait for 10 minutes while he wrote me a warning for jaywalking. When I was a kid, my parents had one of those Oldsmobile Silhouette minivans with the long nose. I was driving it and I accelerated to get through a yellow light before it turned red. That's when the cop turned on the lights. When he got to the window, he asked, "Do you know what a yellow light means, son?" I said, "That means it's going to turn red soon." He said, "No, it means clear the intersection." I told him, "Officer, with the size of this vehicle and the rate I was moving, had anything entered the intersection, I'd have cleared it right out, I promise." He laughed and told me that since I'd caught him off guard and made him laugh, he would let me off with a warning. Me and my 3 friends made a big cranberry vodka in a liter cranberry bottle, and we were walking towards a bar in Manhattan, passing it around. One friend was holding it when a cop slowly pulled up to us. I was the one closest to his window, and he waved me over and asks, "Why is your friend holding a bottle of cranberry juice?" It was pretty obvious it wasn't cranberry on a Friday night in the East Village. I said, "He's on his period." The cop laughed and made us dump it. My brother and I, both underage and both very drunk, were walking home with a dozen donuts and the remains of a six-pack when the cops saw us mostly stumbling along the main road. They pulled around behind us and scared the pants off us with the siren. One cop got out of the car and asked us where we were going. We offered him our donuts. He took our beer. Joke was on him, it was Bud Light. They left us to continue on our way home. I don't think we'd get away with that today. You know that whole Dave Chappelle bit about, "I didn't know I couldn't do that"? Basically, that. I was speeding, although I didn't know I was speeding because there wasn't a sign for miles in a construction zone. The officer pulled me over and told me how since it's a construction zone, the ticket could have been so much worse than a regular speeding ticket. I said, I didn't know that was a thing. I mean, I know there's normally signage saying "men at work, slow down" or something of that nature, but 1, no signs giving me a speed limit, and 2, nobody working. As far as I was concerned, I was driving the normal speed limit, as I was unaware that it had dropped. I didn't know I couldn't do that, got me out of a $700 ticket because he let me off with a warning. I worked at the NCO club on an Air Force base as a teenager. I was a cook sometimes and a dishwasher. I blew through a stop sign and was speeding. Apparently I was being lit up and chased and didn't realize it until I saw the gate closing as I was trying to get off base. The security forces, AFMP, asked me a bunch of questions about it, and I told him I wasn't paying attention due to my eating the cheesy fries that I made sitting in the passenger seat. Then I asked, "Do you want some?" He stared at me for a second and told me to leave. Yelling at a cop for calling me Jack Sparrow instead of Captain Jack Sparrow, while heavily intoxicated and dressed as Captain Jack Sparrow. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was 18, a friend of mine and I stepped out of a restaurant to have a cigarette. We were in the parking lot smoking when a cop pulls up. We weren't doing anything illegal, so we kept doing what we were doing. He walks up to us and asks what we're doing. We tell him, but he doesn't believe us because there were reports of cars getting broken into, which I doubt. He decides to search us. We should have resisted, but didn't know any better at the time. He pulls a brown paper bag out of my friend's pocket, and with a smirk on his face, he asks, "What am I gonna find in here?" My friend keeps a straight face and says, "It's the Emancipation Proclamation." To which the cop says, "Yeah, right." Turns out, it actually was a copy of the Emancipation Proclamation. He had been to the History Museum that day and got a tiny copy as a souvenir. The cop didn't say anything, just handed back the bag and got in his car. "Did you see the speed limit sign?" "Yes, sir, I just didn't see you sitting behind it." I'll never forget how hard he scrunched up his face, trying not to laugh. I was exiting the beer tent at a local summer festival. There were 2 county sheriffs guarding the entrance and exit at the time. Drunk me walks up to one and says, "To protect and serve, right?" And he replies, "Yes, sir." Again, drunk me says, "Well, you could serve me by protecting this beer. I'll be right back." And then I set the beer on the ground near his feet while I went to use the porta-john bathroom. I came back and my beer was still there, untouched. The officer did his job. Got pulled over for quickly accelerating after a traffic light. When the cop asked why, I said it was to try to get away from the butthole with their brights on. He turned to see he still had his brights on and said to have a safe drive home. Well, I'd say you really took a gamble there, and in this case it paid off. But given how many innocents we've seen get ticketed, I'd say you got lucky. When I was 20, I worked at a video store. This one night we had to do inventory, which we started at midnight, and I helped out until 3 a.m. But I was the opener, so I left. I was on my way home when I was pulled over. My tail light was out. I didn't know. The cop left me off with a warning, but it took 15 minutes for him to run my stuff. 2 miles down the same road, but in a different town, I was pulled over by a cop from that town. My taillight was out. I didn't know. The cop let me off with a warning, but it took almost 20 minutes to do so. 5 more miles down the road and yet another town over, I was pulled over again. It's now 4 a.m. My taillight is out. I didn't know. I'm let off with a warning. I make it home at 4:45 a.m. I have work at 9 a.m. I got to sleep. I woke up, skipping a much-needed shower, and left for work. I get pulled over about a mile away from my job. The officer said, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" I said, "Yep, my taillight's out." The officer, "If you know why haven't you fixed it?" "Well, officer, I left work 6 hours ago. I was pulled over 3 times in an hour and a half, and each time I was told that my taillight was out. In the 4 hours since I got home, I went to bed and woke up to go back to work, and I haven't had time to fix it." The officer asked, 3 times? "Yep, so if you're going to give me the ticket, give me the ticket, otherwise I'm assuming that you and your fellow officers just want me to be late to things." I was let off with a warning. In short, got pulled over 4 times in 5 hours and let off with warnings. Driving a 1990 Mercury Sable, dented and miscolored. Do you have any large denominations of US currency with you? Was it the flashy car that tipped you off? You were driving 20 miles below the speed limit. Yes. Why? A cop was following me. A party got busted when I was in college. A majority of the attendees were underage. The cocky campus policeman walked up and said, well, looks like we're going to be checking IDs and handing out underages tonight." Immediately after saying this, his 19-year-old daughter walked out. I was sitting on the porch and said, "You still want those IDs?" It was my first time getting pulled over. I asked for his autograph. I didn't even have my license yet. I was on a learner's permit, but I was late to school and my mum kept telling me to hurry. When I got pulled over, the cop told me I was doing 53 and a 35. I looked at him and said, "Dyslexia?" He was not amused, but he didn't give me any crap for being a smartass. Got pulled up for wearing headphones as a hands-free device. Apparently doing that is illegal in Pennsylvania. He said it was because then you can't hear sirens, so I replied, "Then why can deaf people get driver's licenses?" I tried to call the police to report a crime, but it wasn't an emergency. A guy was walking around my neighborhood, obviously casing houses. I called the police department after hours and couldn't get a hold of anyone. I passed a cop while driving and sped past him so that he'd pull me over. When he said, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" I said, "Yeah, because I wanted you to so I could actually talk to an officer." He went and found the guy and arrested him because he had a warrant out on him. For suspected DUI, I wasn't drunk at all, after about 15 to 20 minutes of field sobriety tests. Do you know the difference between being intoxicated and being impaired? Do you know which one you are? One of them involves me having at least a blood alcohol content of 0.08 in the state of New York, and the other is a synonym you want me to admit so that you can take me in even though I passed all of your sobriety tests. There was a long pause. "You can go, but I'm blasting out your license plate number, and if someone else sees you so much as switch lanes without signaling, they'll book you." That guy was a fricking jerk. He had a big old 1980s mustache and aviator shades on. I asked if his nose came off with the stash and glasses. A buddy of mine is a cop and was at a concert doing security, as in he walked in uniform under the pretense of establishing a presence to dissuade unlawful activity. He really just wanted to see Metallica. Anyway, he's there and some guy lights up a doobie right next to him, turns, looks at him, and the exchange goes, "Ah, crap, a cop. Relax. Really, but this is tobacco. It's a hand-rolled tobacco cigarette. No, it's not. Yes, it is. Oh. Do you want some? Get the frick away from me." Not me, but my girlfriend. I was visiting her at her college town, and we were driving around to get some food. She starts to go down this road that's a one-way road, except she's doing the wrong way. And of course, as luck would have it, the car coming towards her is a cop. She's honking at him, not realizing she's the one going the wrong way. The cop puts his lights on and starts walking towards us. He goes through the motions, license, insurance and stuff, and tells her why she's being pulled over and all that, and then she goes, "Oh, so this is why they pulled me over last time." My girlfriend is very chipper and happy-go-lucky, whatever you call it, so she's saying this with the biggest grin on her face. The cop stops for a second and stares at her and then at me with my "oh crap" look on my face. The cop stares at her and then goes, "And you didn't get a ticket last time," and she replies, again, full smile and chipper, "Nope, I guess cops just like me." He walks away, comes back. Okay, well, be more careful next time. And so we went on our merry way, as I was confused to all heck. I guess cops really do just like her. That sounds like it was just a case of the cop literally not knowing how to react to the situation and just trying to wipe it away from his reality. Nice job. I was driving in Boston, headed to a Bruins game, and I missed the damn turn for the parking garage. I didn't see any cops, so I decided to make an illegal U-turn at the next light. Sure enough, lights go on behind me, and I get pulled over. The officer comes up to my window and hits me with a, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" And I said, "Yeah, 'cause I'm a butthole." After a good laugh and a warning, he told me to go be a butthole on the other side of the city. I was riding my motorcycle away from the traffic lights at a speed allowed in the area. Admittedly, my engine just revved rather loud. The police officer said, "I've stopped you for speeding." I wasn't speeding. I could tell by the sound of your engine you were speeding. That's absurd. Are you trying to tell me you can tell what speed something is going by the noise? Yes. Okay. I pointed at a plane flying overhead. What speed's that going at then? No ticket, but he wasn't very amused. This wasn't so much smart-ass, but still awesome. I got pulled over by 2 cops, and it turns out there's been some burglaries in the area, and they're out looking. They take a look at me and decide I can't be the person they're looking for, but one decides to have some small talk. While we're chatting away, this colleague casually circles my car with a torch. I start to tense up. I have 4 tires balder than Professor X, and if they spot them, they could take away my license on the spot. The searching cop comes back and pulls away the chatty one. Excusing himself, they walk around my car. They look at my tires. I see the chatty one shake his head. Coming back to my window, he says, "Miss..." He can see the look of horror on my face. He knows I'm screwed. "Have you had a look at your tires recently?" My face says it all. He regards me silently, then seems to come to a conclusion. He takes a deep breath and suddenly practically shouts, "Well, they're great tires. Perfect. So much tread left on them, it's insane. Possibly the best tires I've ever seen. Definitely wouldn't insist on going straight to a garage first thing in the morning and getting them all changed." I stared at him for a second, then caught on and replied in a tone equally as loud and deliberate, "Oh, thank you, officer. I promise that I certainly won't go straight to the garage and get 4 brand new ones tomorrow. Have a great evening. Thank you for your time." "You're welcome," he booms and gestures for me to leave. As I look in my mirrors driving away, I see the searching cop gesturing at the chatty one in confusion and annoyance, while my cop just shakes his head and smiles. Legend. I offered the officer a donut from the box on my front seat when he pulled me over due to a burned-out taillight. He took 2, gave me a warning to get it fixed ASAP, and left. What are some of your craziest near-death experiences? I'll explain. I work as a millwright for a company that manufactures automation equipment. Today I was working at a bench near the machine shop when my IT guy came in to install my new shop PC, a speedy little unit armed with a P4, 768 megs of RAM, and one hell of a heart. I know, you're jealous. I leave the bench to go and enter my password on the shiny, new piece of tech and have a few words with him about the sad state of affairs. No more than a minute and a half later, I hear a horrible sound of metal hitting something solid, and then what sounded like someone threw the biggest ninja star in the world across the shop. By the time I looked up, it was past us, and as I turned around, it struck and mangled a shelving unit against the far wall. I ran over to make sure the machinist was okay because he was working on the lathe, and I figured out that was where it came from. The lathe is a machine that can turn pieces of metal at over 1,000 rotations per minute. He was fine, but pretty shaken. Turns out the adjustable dead stop at the rear of the lathe came apart, no fault of his own, at a high speed and hit the floor and went merrily on its way. The dead stop is a 4-foot piece of 1.5-inch solid steel bar, not something to be messed with at 100 miles per hour. It was jammed about half an inch deep into reinforced concrete. The worst part was, I followed the path it took and it was directly over the top of the spot on the bench I was working at. I bought a lotto ticket and a big bottle of Jameson's when I got home. Tonight we drink, because we didn't get decapitated today. I was working at a normal boring office job and I needed to come in on a Saturday to get some work done. So I parked in the parking deck and got in the elevator to go down to the first floor. The elevator was sort of old and crappy and I'd seen people working on it on and off all week. I got in and everything went normally until I reached the first floor. As the elevator settles into place, I hear this loud metallic clanging from somewhere far above me, followed by a loud scraping noise that's obviously something sliding down the side of the shaft at freefall speed. During this, the door starts to open, and I'm gripped with indecision as to whether I should leap out of the elevator or take my chances where I am. I decide to run for it, but about half a second later my decision is made for me when a large steel panel, maybe about 4 by 6 feet, flashes guillotine-like through the space between the open elevator door and hits the bottom of the shaft with a thunderous crash. And then I step out of the elevator and the doors close like nothing has happened. And of course, it turned out the door I was trying to use was locked on the weekend, so I had to go back up to where I started from. I took the stairs. It turned out later that the guys doing the work had forgotten to refasten some sort of panel on some machinery. If I'd been half a second faster at deciding what I wanted to do, it would have cut me in half and nobody would have found me until Monday morning. In short, almost got cut in half due to crappy elevator maintenance. I kind of feel like this was your final destination near-death experience and that you should have been very careful going forward. Except, hold on, this post was 12 years ago. No more answers from the author on the story since then. Oh, thank God, he's writing on other things. He's fine, folks. He's fine. 2 weeks ago, I had some weird chest pains and decided to walk to the ER. It got worse as I went, but by then I was pretty close to the place, so I just kept going. I walked in the automatic door and within 4 seconds, I hit the floor. Heart attack. This was at 2:30 in the morning in this dinky little town. If the heart attack had hit me a minute sooner, I would have laid out on the sidewalk and died. They tell me that my heart stopped for 3 minutes. I don't think it would have started up again without the compressions and shock paddles and whatever else they did. If you're going to have a heart attack, I highly recommend having it right there in the ER. We had a loss of depth control on my submarine while in some heavy seas and in not-so-friendly territory. Sunk out very deep and had to use the emergency blow to regain control of depth. One of the dudes in sonar with me started to cry. It was some spooky stuff. Funny enough, the same thing happened to our boat on the east coast. We were somewhere where we weren't supposed to be, and the captain thought that since it was slow and nothing was going on, why not run some drills in prep for AITA, Operational Safety Exams for the layman's, when we get back. We ran the loss of propulsion drill, and the nuclear engineers couldn't get it back up and running, and something broke. We sank out way past recommended depth, and we had to emergency blow to get back up, and we barely made it back to the surface before emptying the tanks. The sonar sup on watch lost it and had to be relieved. I was fire control technician on watch at the time, and nothing is worse than coming up to the surface and not knowing what's out there that could hit us. This happened just today, actually. I'm visiting my eldest brother for the week, and while he's at work today, I decide to go on a bike ride to see the neighborhood. I find his bike and take it and start going down the road. The roads are mostly flat, and I soon find myself going down a side road with lots of bushes and trees on both sides. Then the road starts to become a downwards incline. Not too steep, but steep enough where I'm gaining speed without pedaling. I'm going now at a decent pace and remember that it's an unknown road and I don't have a bike helmet on. I should slow down. The brakes don't seem to be working. Moving faster now. Down the hill getting steeper. Wait, what the heck? I've got no brakes. At this point in time, I'm really moving fast. I was pretty much going about as fast as someone that was biking all out under their own power on a flat piece of land could go. I look ahead to see if this hill has any plans to flatten out before something bad happens to me. This is a problem. The road ahead, about 25 meters away, takes a sharp turn left. I can't see past that turn, but I can see that it's a downward slope the entire way. I had a choice. Take the turn blind and hope that the road is safe and the hill flattens out, or do something right now to stop my bike before I get to the unknown turn ahead. I decide to do the latter and aimed for someone's bushes on the side of the road. About 5 seconds later, I slammed into the bushes, moving about, 20 miles per hour? It was a lot more painful than I thought it would be. I got the wind knocked out of me, and was covered with a dozen cuts or so, some of them bleeding through my clothes. As I limp over to drag my bike out of this yard, I get a chance to see what's around that blind corner. After the turn, there was about 10 feet of street and then a stop sign. It then crossed a 4-lane frontage road that was full of cars moving in either direction at high speeds. If I didn't decide to crash into the bushes, I would have taken the turn and found myself moving 20 miles per hour right across 4 lanes of busy traffic. In short, 6 hours ago I made a split-second decision which ended up saving me from slamming into traffic on a bike. I was urban exploring at an abandoned jail during my high school years. We were on the 3rd floor of a building and there was a catwalk that was behind and between the cells, which we decided to explore. Below us was a drop of about 40 to 50 feet to a bunch of mangled metal and concrete in the basement. As I was walking on the catwalk, it rotted off the boards and began to fall downwards. My friend was behind me, luckily, and grabbed me by my hoodie while jumping on the seesawing catwalk. I still owe him to this day, because I'm sure I would have been impaled on something had the fall not killed me. Needless to say, my stupidity would have killed me. I make plastic injection mold, which produce plastic parts for the automotive industry. When two halves are together, they can get pretty huge when making things like the inside door panels or truck grills and whatnot. Anyway, I was once operating an overhead crane trying to separate two halves of the mold, each half being about 10,000 pounds. I was leaning in close because when separating these, the top tends to get cocked, and you need to adjust the position of the crane in small increments to get the weight to come off just right. I was constantly needing to adjust in one direction, which after about 5 seconds started raising some red flags in my head, since that's a pretty extreme adjustment. I looked up and someone was operating the other overhead crane and without knowing it was pushing mine out of position. In the span of time it took me to yell, "Hey, frick, stop!" My crane had been pushed far enough that my load basically sprung off the steel horses and shot towards me. I got super lucky, and the load ended up balanced on the single horse. A few inches either way and it would have fallen off and I might not be here today. It was a pretty scary day. That's a smoke break, right? That's a finish setting down that load and go for a drag outside while exercising a 1,000-yard stare kind of incident at work. No, I don't smoke, but I think I might if that happened. I climb towers in the US, cell phone towers more specifically. As a climber, we're equipped with various safety devices. For climbing a tower, we have a safety climb, which attaches to a metal wire running the length of the ladder. For free climbing, outside of the ladder, we have two pelican hooks, or PFAs, personal fall arrest systems, which are basically two huge carabiners hooked onto a fabric lanyard that's attached to our climbing belt. On top of all of this, we have a number of adjustable lanyards, pelican hooks, and carabiners to make working as safe and smooth as possible. One day, in particular, I was working on a tower in California, roughly 350 feet tall, give or take. Anyone who's been mountain climbing in California knows that it can get windy. Where are the most cell sites located? On mountaintops. Better reception, more range, but not fun to work on when bad weather rolls in. This was one of those days where the weather chose to work against us. We arrived, and as soon as the truck door was flung open wildly by the wind, we knew the day was going to be horrible. There's not much you can do aside from put on all the layers of clothing you have and hope it's enough. I suit up, throw my belt on, and stand at the bottom of the ladder, looking up for a moment and listening to the wind howl as it passes through the various tubes and slots of metal situated on the tower. It's a haunting sound. So we climb the tower, and about 3 hours into work, I move to work on a new antenna. I do the usual, double-check all of my connections and slowly put my weight on said connections so that I can let go of the tower and use my hands to work if I have to. No problem. I sit there working, shifting my weight, occasionally just doing the job. The wind is pulling the tears from my eyes, and my windbreaker hoodie has been flapping like a hummingbird wing in my ears for the entire day. One little shift of my weight and the world drops out from under me. My foot slips. I grab the tower, but I'm falling. I've never fallen so slow. I could clearly see a handhold coming up and remember having the time to consciously think, I can grab this, before my hips slammed into it and my body slid over the side of the metal. I was caught by my armpit. As traumatic as it was, I don't remember much after catching myself. I sat there stunned for a minute and looked up to where I was working. I would guess that I fell roughly 15 to 20 feet. I saw the crossbeam that I was tied off to bent slightly, and when I climbed back to finish the job, I noticed that the nut on the bolt holding the piece in was missing. I'm guessing it de-threaded over time, or maybe it was never there to begin with. More than anything, I remember just being embarrassed. I never told my co-workers. In short, a faulty bolt connection almost killed me on a cell tower. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I almost drowned in a canoe when I was 9. I was under the water for about 30 seconds before my cousin's boyfriend, now husband, pulled me out. I had Kawasaki syndrome when I was 2, and none of the doctors knew what it was, but one random newly graduated med student came in and diagnosed it right away. I don't know who it was, but he saved my life. My brother came extremely close to death. He was 3 and I was 5. We were at our neighbors playing. I was at their pond with my friend and her mum, and my brother was riding a tricycle in the driveway. Their grandpa was a truck driver and had the cab of his truck on the driveway. All of a sudden, I hear my friend's mum screaming and running towards the truck. She's waving her hands and yelling, "Stop!" over and over again. My brother was riding the trike in front of the truck and Grandpa didn't see him. He started it and knocked my brother off the trike and underneath the truck. The Grandpa saw the mum and stopped. My brother had hit his head on something underneath the truck and had tire marks on his head and arm where the tires brushed up against him. If the Grandpa hadn't stopped exactly when he did, my brother would have been run over. The Grandpa stopped driving trucks after this happened because he felt so bad. He had to change his career after that? That's a profound change. I know the majority of our parents didn't give up driving after the many, many times that their kids got in front of the family sedans on our tricycles and skateboards. I'm a manufacturing manager in Texas. I've seen a machinist working on an automated lathe with his shirt untucked. The lathe malfunctioned and started operating when he was working on it, and caught his shirt. He was pulled up and over for about 20 times until someone could shut it off. He can't walk anymore. When I was about 4, I was waiting in the line to jump into the ocean off a dock in Jakarta, when a little rude French boy jumped into the water right as I was supposed to. He ended up jumping on a man-of-war jellyfish and nearly died. If that had been me, I was so little I would have died. During officer training in the German army, my class and I received training on our assigned weapon systems. I'm with Armored Recon, so mine is, or was, since it's been phased out a few years ago, an 8-wheeled reconnaissance tank with a 20mm machine cannon for self-defense. This is some serious hardware, dealing out 20mm high-explosive rounds with a kill radius of 6 meters at 1,000 rounds per minute. They're pin-fired and the primer needs about 70 newtons, that's 70 kilograms of force, to ignite the charge. That will become important later on. So I'm tasked with loading the gun for some live firing as fast as possible, since we're already behind schedule. Now, the ammo comes in 25-round belts, which have to be linked and fed into the storage compartment inside the turret. This process is done by one person sitting inside. There are special tools to pull out single rounds, overlap 2 links and connect the 2 belts with the spare round. These have to be used for safety reasons. I, being young and dumb but ambitious, of course choose to ignore all safety precautions because it's faster that way. The high-explosive storage compartment is at about knee level in front of me and holds about 300 rounds. I'm trying to link the final belt to the snake-like chain of death half a meter away from my crotch, but the round I have to pull out is stuck in the link. I apply all my strength, but this is stuck, man. For a second, I contemplate using the special pair of pliers designed exactly for this task. Nah. I pull again with the belt against my shins, pulling the round towards me for maximum leverage. It suddenly comes free. Unable to stop the motion because of the surprise, my hand and ammo combo move between my legs at the speed of sound. No, it didn't hit my Johnson, but the base of the round, where the primer is, struck the edge of the steel storage container under the seat I was occupying, with the loudest frickin' clang I have ever heard. I pause. Silence. 5 seconds pass. 10 seconds pass. A bead of sweat rolls down my chin. I finally managed to move my arm again. I look at the base of the round. Around 2 millimeters, that's 1/10 of an inch, next to the primer, is a huge fricking dent, twice that deep. What I'm trying to say is, a bit more to the left and that thing would have gone off in my hand, sending shrapnel and burning powder right into the ammo storage, where 299 rounds of live 20mm high-explosive ammo was sitting. That, combined with the 500 liters of diesel fuel in the tank, would have provided quite a spectacular fireworks display. I presume anyway. Maybe they would have found my teeth. Terribly sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, but your son is dead because he was a freaking moron. There are more instances where I almost died, getting shot, squashed or decapitated during training, but this one was the one with the most profound impact on me. In short, almost blew myself, 300 rounds of 20mm ammo and a recon tank up due to stupidity. And that, sweet viewers, is why the narrator isn't in any of the armed forces. I wouldn't even make it to contact with the enemy, because something like this would have happened the first time I was allowed near anything more dangerous than a wooden practice rifle. Several years back, I worked as an electrician's apprentice. We were rewiring an industrial printing press. If you haven't seen one, those things are massive. This one was 30 feet tall and about 200 feet long. On this particular day, we had to rewire a portion of the master control unit. This involved pulling out like 300 feet of wire and then rerunning it. The guy who I apprenticed under told me that the power had been locked out of that side of the press. This is for safety because you can't have people working around live wires that run industrial currents. This is where my whole day started to turn to crap. Being an apprentice, I said, okay, and trusted him. Note to self, never trust someone again when your life is on the line. So here I am on top of the printing press pulling this wire out. They run the wires in a gutter-like thing to keep all of the wiring neat and out of the way. The gutter was run over the press and then down to the master control unit. So I'm pulling the wire and having a pretty good day so far. Then the wire gets stuck on something. Okay, I'll just put some oomph into it. It didn't budge. Now, let me clarify exactly where I am right now. The press is 30 feet high, and it has a catwalk around the top of it to access certain parts of it for service. The catwalk has a standard metal handrail, so people don't fall off it. I, being the naturally smart person that I am, have one foot on top of the press, and the other foot is on the handrail. I'm standing precariously on these about 30 to 35 feet in the air, and I'm reaching up to this metal gutter and pulling wires that are stuck. Well damn, this sucks. A light bulb goes off in my head. Screw it, I'll just cut it and pull this half out right here. And this is where the defecation hits the ventilation. So it turns out the guy I apprenticed under was either A, incompetent, or B, a jerk of mythic proportions. So here I am, precariously balanced, and I cut the wire. I can only describe what happened next as a dream. Time literally slowed down like in a movie. Slow motion, zzzz. I can feel my body buzzing from the shock, yet I don't actually feel pain. The next thing I know, I'm looking at the sky. It's so pretty. I see the clouds, weird but pretty. I stare at the sky for a few minutes. Then it turns into the Far Side comic of Custard's Last Sight. Basically, I see a circle of heads all around me and people look scared. Well, that's kinda weird. I sit up and let me tell you, I felt frickin' great. So full of energy. No pun intended. I've never felt better. Everyone is slack-jawed and staring, and no one says anything. After a few minutes, I look up at the top of the press where I was. Something tickles my memory. Why is that familiar? Slowly it dawns on me that I was doing something up there recently. Another minute passes and it all becomes clear. The buzzing, the body shaking, the sky. I look down and my hands are all bloody, and so is my leg. Finally, one of the guys says, "Holy frick, dude." Yes, my good man, holy frick indeed. It turns out that after getting hit with 480 volts, I fell backwards 30 feet, bounced off a 6-foot steel cabinet, landed on my head, and flopped onto my back. I'm bleeding from where the electricity went in and from where it shot out, as well as several cuts from the cabinet. The ambulance arrives, I go to the hospital, only the few minor cuts, no real damage. Doctors and paramedics couldn't believe I wasn't dead from the electricity or the fall. Good times. In short, got electrocuted, fell 35 feet onto my head, and walked away with only a few minor cuts. How do adult children of helicopter parents deal with them later in life? My dad was never a helicopter parent. He was actually the complete opposite. My mum was a super helicopter parent. When I was a sophomore in high school, I got grounded from everything. I couldn't go anywhere or do anything. I had to go to school and come home. I couldn't watch TV unless it was about God. I didn't have a phone or a computer and couldn't listen to music. For months. It got worse and worse as time went on. She'd give me a curfew randomly one day and it would be different the next day. I'd get in trouble for not following a curfew I had no idea existed. She gaslit me so much that I often felt like I deserved what was happening to me. After going to therapy, I'm better able to identify between her more mean-spirited and bipolar tendencies. I'm working on minimizing contact with her, so whenever she's being a pain in my butt, I just tell her to F off. Mine say things and I just kind of go, like I'm agreeing that I'll do those things, but I never verbally say that I'll do those things. Same. It's easier to lie and agree than to tell the truth and spend the next half hour listening to a monologue. I still live with my parents. I avoid their invasive questions, but I'm pretty honest about everything I do choose to share with them. My siblings and I are whole adults, so they try to be less insane these days. Funny story though, the other day my sister and I were watching Pulp Fiction, and my dad waltzed into our room, stared at the TV for a second and goes, "That movie is for grown-ups." My sister said, "I'm 25. They still helicopter me, actually more than ever now that I'm 24, and I'm not sure what suddenly turned the dial up. However, I'm finally planning on moving out for good this year with my boyfriend. Every time I bring it up, they don't believe me, or they think I'm kidding and say it isn't happening. Oh well, I did tell them. I guess they'll get a reality check when the time comes, and it won't be on me. I just say no when I'm told to do something or follow a rule. I don't give a reason even when I'm asked why. It's so satisfying. I don't. That's how I deal with my parents later in life. I don't do it. I'm not no contact with them, but I'm absolutely firm on my boundaries and standing up for myself, and I don't let their tantrums sway me. On the other hand, the pressure does eat at me, but I'll never let them know that. This video is an odd and mostly positive sequel from one of our previous videos, What's the worst case of helicopter parents that you've ever seen? Feel free to check it out if you'd like to know more about what these adults are rebelling against. My parents weren't, but a friend moved to a different state and got engaged, and his mum still managed to be a helicopter parent, visiting at least 3 times a month and contacting either her or her significant other constantly. It ruined the engagement because the significant other finally had enough, because even though my friend was annoyed with her mum as well, she couldn't cut her mum off completely. I don't know all the details, but it must have been super annoying if someone was like, I love you, but F having in-laws like this. She's now single and has moved back home. It's unfortunate. Honestly, me and my husband are trying to figure this out. My mother-in-law is a total helicopter parent. If one of us, me or my husband or his brother, doesn't respond to her messages within an hour or two, she'll bombard the other two about where we are or if something happened to us. She freaked out on me when I didn't respond to her after 3 hours. We were doing a cross-country drive, and she accused me of trying to shut her out and said we're never going to be a real family because of the walls that I've built up around myself. I don't know what to do. My husband won't stand up to her as much as I want him to, but I can't do this for the rest of my life. We have to establish some boundaries. But it's not my mum, so I can't be the one to initiate it. Well, yeah, he's obviously so used to it that he doesn't actually understand how damaging this is. I know of a few marriages that dissolved because of one helicopter parent. It's only going to get worse if you ever have children. They'll become helicopter grandparents, and that's even more stifling. They'll tell you exactly how to raise your own children and get angry when you don't take their overflowing advice. If he won't put his foot down and he gets mad at you for putting your foot down, then it's not going to last, and if it does, it won't be happy. I have a friend whose mother-in-law would just show up unannounced and expect to be welcomed in, asked for a key when they started pretending they weren't home, then eventually kept suggesting that they should move to her neighborhood to be closer as a family. The wife wanted to move across the country just to avoid this woman, and her mama's boy husband was aghast at this idea. They ended up divorcing. By the way, after posting this story, my inbox blew up with angry helicopter parents telling me to go F myself. I must have struck a nerve. It's funny to me that "it's family" is used to justify all sorts of awful behavior that you'd never rationalize if it wasn't coming from someone who created you. The person I was replying to was obviously upset with the situation they're in, and I've seen a number of similar situations play out in my life. Hence the advice. I'm low contact. A lot of us go low or no contact. My older brother and I moved out as soon as we turned 18. He moved to the opposite side of the country and I moved 3 states away. He still keeps low contact and is still on the East Coast. I came back home when I became homeless at 25 and noticed that while we were gone, my mother, the helicopter, had done a lot of soul-searching and realized that her controlling nature pushed her kids away. She's been in Codependence Anonymous for almost 8 years now. And I'm happy to say for the first time in my life, I enjoy spending time with my mum. It took a bit, but I was able to transition out of low contact. I had no idea they had recovery groups for codependent people. I'm glad to see your mother was able to progress and have improvements for herself. CODA is fantastic for domestic victims, as well as obsessive helicopter parents or anyone with codependency problems. I ignore them. To be honest, it's also because I'm in a different city and have a hectic job. But there was also a period of slowly getting them used to the fact that they would not know and control every detail of my adult life. I don't know if I'd say I'm an adult because I'm 19 and still in college, and does that really count? But yeah, I just ignore them. They say, do this, and I say, okay, and then I do whatever the frick I want. They've got to drive 13 hours to get to me. I can't see them paying for a plane flight. What are they going to do, call me? I can just not answer it. They said, share your location with us, and I said, no, and it was amazing. They said, give me your password so we can check your grades, and I was like, nope, I can't, it's location-based, whoops, sorry, it's not. They say, don't go out, and I just tell them I'm not going to frat parties. Meanwhile, I'm going like 3 hours away for 2 nights for a weekend trip with a whole damn frat. I tell them I wake up at 9 every day and go to sleep at 11:30 and that I eat 3 times a day. I have 4 friends that they trust that I always say that I'm hanging out with. I have a separate Insta account that they can follow so they don't see what I'm doing. I pay for my own subscriptions so they can't see what I have. I have my own credit card so they can't police what I buy, and I don't tell them when it's time to register for classes, so they can't tell me what to sign up for. I made that mistake last semester. I don't tell them what finals I have when, so they can't police my studying every hour. I've got 4 cream sodas in my fridge right now. My mum would flip if she found out that I drank soda. Huh? So basically, ignore them and hide things, I guess. Probably not the best habits, but you know what? I'm enjoying being able to step outside for a moment without being asked, "Where are you going?" Or being able to talk about someone I sit next to without being asked about their family or grades. Went for a walk on campus at 6 yesterday, on my own, and no one yelled at me for it. And look, they're not cut off. I still communicate with them, but I just hide a lot, so they think my college existence is the exact same as my high school existence. And I also don't answer every single call or text from them immediately. But I call home and say hi on weekends and keep them somewhat updated on what I'm doing. And no, I'm not fully financially independent yet. I'm working on it. I'm paying for half of college. I'm high-key too scared to try and discuss boundaries while they can still hold half of my tuition over my head. Although the last author's gripes about their parents are very much valid, I know that in my previously referenced video on them, I believe a number of said parental figures insisted on breaking into their children's universities and even job interviews, so you should consider yourself lucky in that respect at least. I had to be extremely mean and blunt with my mum. I'm a mid-30s man and had to straight up tell her that I have a family and my own life, and she needs to go and get a hobby or take classes or anything whatsoever that will give her a sense of value because I don't need a gosh darn interfering invasive mother any longer. When she started giving me the, "That's so horrible that you talk to your mother that way," or the, "Oh no, my kids don't need me anymore," I literally flat out had to just say, "I don't give a crap, Mum, go work it out." I had to be super mean to her about it. Sometimes parents have to cut their children off, and sometimes children have to cut their parents off. It doesn't make me feel good, but I sleep fine. I feel ya. I moved back in with my parents in November. I'm 26, and when I moved back in, I explained to my mum that I usually go and hang out with my friends 2 to 3 times per week, and I enjoy being out of the house a lot. Still, when I come back home, I get several questions about where I was and who I was with, what I was doing, etc. It drives me insane, and I have to straight up tell her to stop questioning me. I feel bad about being so short with her, but I don't have much privacy there. My parents weren't that bad, but they were quite overprotective. After I turned 21, I still wasn't allowed out after dark and all that jazz. Had to let them know where I was going and who I was seeing in case I was murdered. What I did was move to another continent. I talk to them every couple of weeks over WhatsApp voice chat. They try and tell me what to do sometimes, and I'm just like, okay, and I don't do it. I'm white British and moved to the US when I was 24. Last I checked with them, my parents had agreed that my mum is no longer allowed out in the front garden without my dad, quote, because of all the blacks moving in. Just in case you wanted any confirmation on their sanity. The way that I got my mum to chill out on me was to tell her that I wanted to go to college out of state. That was the moment she realized she wasn't going to be protective of me forever, and it took her a long time to accept it. As of now, she's been a little easier on me, although she still sometimes treats me like a child. If I'm out of state, then I just limit contact with her and don't call home often. I think a lack of contact is the best everyone with helicopter parents can do initially, because it's just so refreshing to be by yourself with nobody breathing on your neck after so long. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My brother and I had no free time allowed growing up, just music and homework allowed. Now we're both over 30, my dad has passed away now, and he was never the problem to be honest. But my mum still does her best to control our lives, inserting herself into situations she doesn't belong in, and passively aggressively putting us in situations that she wants to happen. But cutting her off or telling her she's overstepping makes us the bad ones in her mind, so minimal contact and details are all that's left on the menu for her for now. My brother doesn't get it though and gives her the minute details of his life and then gets annoyed when she thinks she can have a say in how he lives his life. Limiting contact with my mother has worked for me as well. When I was in middle school, my friends asked if I wanted to join them, and I always had to stay home because of her migraine, etc. Because my parents are divorced, I moved in with my father and then later moved out of town. Somewhat cutting contact made her worry, and she stays on the phone for hours if I don't stop her when we talk, but it did get a lot better. My husband deals with this with his mother. We make decisions as a married couple, and then later everything changes after they talk to each other. Even situations dealing with our daughter, like I have no say even when he and I were on the same page before decisions were put into action. He's so desperate to please his mum that he turns his back on me. When I confront him, he blames me for causing drama or being petty. I don't know, his mum acts like she's his wife and he lets it happen. It grosses me out. I'm sorry to tell you, but this will get worse and you might only get your husband to listen to you if you persist on doing couples counseling. His behavior is putting your relationship in danger and he might need a good smack from someone else to see his wrongdoings. Don't let him step over you. Set firm boundaries with your mother-in-law and him now. Tell him to grow a spine. Do it for your child. Both of my parents have problems with setting boundaries with their parents, and it's unbearable. Stay strong and maybe visit the No Mill subreddit. My parents track my location at all times now. I'm 27. That way, they don't call the cops if I don't pick up within 30 minutes, which has happened multiple times. I once fell asleep on the couch and my parents couldn't get hold of me for an hour. They concluded that I hit my head in the shower and died. My parents are immigrants and only have me, so I'm not sure if that has to do with their anxiety. Stone-cold boundaries and a residence more than 1,000 miles away. This seems to be a brief summary of the majority of people's solutions to the problem. The other seems to be therapy, which to an extent requires some willingness from the parents to be open about the fact that they have a problem. And let's be honest, that might not be the case for everyone. You've got to rip that band-aid off, and it will suck. But it's better than letting this continue. I have some experience with this from rescuing both my wife and her siblings from their mother and immigrant community. It was a rescue that took years. It sucked. It still sucks sometimes. Cops, ethnic gang shenanigans, kidnapping, people with deadly weapons and attempted murder. All of that fricking happened. The only reason certain people aren't in jail is my wife forbade me from ensuring it. They're family. The advice below comes from that experience and it may not apply to all of you. I hope almost none of it does. You have to have a plan before every interaction. You'll need those plans until independence becomes a part of you. This can take years and you will probably feel like you're a horrible person for doing it. My wife still sometimes feels like the worst daughter in the world. You're not the worst. They're the worst. You deserve to be free. If you struggle with the guilt, see a therapist. They really help. If your therapist doesn't help, then get a new therapist. Every plan must have the following things in it. 1. You have a goal and stick with it. There's going to be a lot of things you want to change. And you can't change everything on day one. Keep it simple and don't bend your goal. Don't accommodate them with any amendments. All of that is just a slippery slope right the frick back into their controlling hands. 2. Be ready to walk away. This means you shouldn't argue. You're not making a request, you're telling them how it is now. After they reject it, and they will, don't argue. Just walk away or hang up. If arguing could change anything, things would already be different for you. You can't control them, and that's actually a good, healthy thing. You need to be clear that they can't control you either. Arguing tells them that they have a chance. 3. Have a prepared consequence like, if they cause trouble, I'm just going to hang up and block their number for a couple of weeks. And 4. Expect it to go horribly. It just will. Their reactions will almost certainly be a messed up control freak version of the stages of grief. They will rage and they will scream. Expect this. They'll try to guilt trick you into giving them back their control. Expect this. Follow your plan. You'll have to tell the cops to ignore them when they call about you. Expect this. Other people associated with your family might try to talk to you about the latest conflict. Expect their betrayal. Don't hate them. They're trapped in the same cultural bullcrap. Just don't assume they're on your side. If you can, do not meet them in person. They have to earn it by respecting your boundaries. The first meetings will almost certainly be manipulative, sneaky, or a guilt trip plot. Expect this and remember rule number 2, walk away. Meetings may always be this way. You may want early meetings in a public place like a restaurant. If they come from a culture that does honor killing, you must consider the possibility that any attempt to meet or any sudden contact from another relative or immigrant friend of the family is actually a murder or kidnap or acid plan. And this isn't racist bullcrap, I've lived through this stuff. If you fall for it and actually go, protect yourself. Don't go alone, take a friend or two. My wife made the mistake of doing visits without me and horrible stuff happened every time. Don't repeat her mistakes. Make sure that people know where you are and that the people you're visiting know that other people know. If you're a female, this is even more important. Certain immigrant cultures see female children as family property. Your misbehavior is an embarrassment to the whole family and shames them in the community. Shame can turn to murder rage real frickin' quick. or it can simmer for months, and a carefully crafted lie will lead you to a horrific end. Be paranoid, stay safe, and finally, no matter how many years have gone by, you can't visit the country they're from with them, ever. Over there, they can beat you all they want and have family and friends and culture crap to call upon to control you. This is real stuff that happens. Tricking uppity family into a visit home for a little correction is a very real thing to them. You can visit the old country, just not with them. And any visits with family over there need to be considered very carefully. The best thing to do is treat a visit like an actual vacation. Go to all of the popular vacation destinations and meet family for food somewhere once or twice, and then be on your way. Well, that was a very extreme guide on how to deal with a very specific sort of helicopter parent. Along with a few other complicated cultural factors, it seems like a very stressful and time-consuming process to break someone out of this situation. I hope you and your wife and her family have found a semblance of balance and happiness. Unfortunately, the helicopter behavior continued after I got married and had children. Eventually, the only way to gain control was to go no contact. Fundamentally, it boiled down to a complete lack of respect for boundaries. My happiness, marriage, and ability to be a good parent were all suffering because my mother was still trying to control my life. We tried setting up boundaries, but that only escalated things. I would have gladly gone to family counseling if she had agreed, but it was far easier for her to complain to her friends that her children don't speak to her. And yes, my brother cut her off too. I strongly recommend the following books: Stop Walking on Eggshells by Paul Mason and Boundaries by Henry Cloud. I also very strongly recommend counseling. 1. I moved to a different country. 2. I don't go back to visit. 3. When they come visit, they stay in a hotel. And 4. My husband, who was not raised in an overbearing environment, is always present when they visit. He serves as a reality check and is effective in shutting down misbehavior. And 5, I'm going to have to explain one day that they won't be allowed unsupervised visits with any children that I have. I ended up having to remove my parents from my life, and at first it was really hard. But seriously, they've controlled every aspect of it. When I was a kid, my internet time was limited and supervised. I was allowed like an hour a day on electronics. I wasn't allowed to play any violent video games. I really only played Mario Kart. I wasn't allowed to play Pokemon because it had evolution in it. I wasn't allowed to read Harry Potter because it was magic, and magic is bad. They decided which college I went to when I was 18. They decided which degree I got. When I was struggling to find work, they pushed me to go into a field I didn't want to go to, which I'm now stuck in. When I was sick as well, it was really rare that I went to the doctor. At one point, I was dying from a bad case of pneumonia, and they refused to hospitalize me, even though I was almost dead. Quite literally. My lungs were full of fluid and my oxygen level was running at 82%. Even on oxygen, that number didn't go up. Once I moved out of my house, I started to talk to them less until last year I finally just decided to cut them off. Talking to them gave me anxiety and they always tried to steer my life in a different direction, so I figured it was better to cut them out completely. At first it was hard, but it's gotten easier over time. My mother made my bank accounts, insurances, and even my mobile phone contract when I was underage, and she just kept them. I also think she stole money from me, but that's a different story. She said I wasn't able to manage this kind of stuff by myself. With the help of my significant other, I took everything back from her when I was 26. When I visited her, she tried to pressure me into stuff again, so I threatened her that I would pack up my stuff and leave immediately, and that she would never see me or talk to me ever again in her life. Those two things were kind of wake-up calls for her. Now she's so afraid that I could really go no contact that she keeps her stupid mouth shut. What did you do that immediately got you kicked out of a job? After graduating from grad school, I was having trouble finding jobs in my chosen career. I'd ended up applying to retail jobs just to get an income. I got hired at Old Navy. I went through training and even had 1 to 2 shifts. Then I got hired in my chosen career. Great! I went and told one of my managers, who was totally cool with it and understood, and even said I might be able to stay on part-time and help out during the holidays. Cool! Next shift, I have to tell the other manager that I got a new job. I just clocked in to start work, told this manager, and she tells me I can leave. I clock back out. I wasn't even allowed to work that shift. I barely knew her, but just from the short interactions I had with her, she seemed like a total jerk. I was 21. My first real full-time job was as an apprentice in an aircraft instrument repair shop. It was a small shop, just the owner, a bookkeeper, and myself. I loved it and was really enjoying working with my hands and being around the aircraft all the time. Just as we were closing up one day, the owner got a call. A customer needed an instrument. Did we have it, and could we send it right away? We did have it, and since it was closing time, the owner told me to box up the part and label it. While I was doing that, he wrote a check to UPS and left the amount blank. He gave me the check and told me it was very important that the part get to UPS on time and to fill in the amount when I sent it. He also told me to be sure and bring back the receipt. The owner left me to lock up and take the package to UPS on the way home. I finished boxing up the part, locked up the shop, yes, he trusted me with the key, and I took the package to the UPS. When I went to the counter, the guy weighed the package, printed out a ticket which he stuck on the box, and then pitched the box onto the belt. I watched the package disappear down the conveyor and reached into my pocket for the check the owner had given me. When I looked at the check, I realized that he'd put the date and made the check payable to the UPS, left the amount blank but had also failed to sign the check. I didn't have enough cash on me to pay for the shipping. The box had already gone down the belt. The owner had stressed that this was a good customer and the part had to get there the next day. The check was already filled out to UPS, so I went ahead and wrote in the amount, $4.12, this was in 1977. I signed my boss's name on the check and handed it over to the guy behind the counter. He took the check, the package made it to the customer. The next day when I arrived at work, I immediately told my boss, the owner, what had happened. He fired me on the spot for signing his name to the check and watched me while I packed up my tools and left. One of my first jobs was working for this bucket telesales operation. We were selling long-distance plans, and they would change the fee structure and resell the same plan under a different name to the same customers. I went 1 week top of the sales chart, got a weekly bonus, and next week I was in the bottom numbers. This was the second or third week out of the training program as well. Ranking came out, and they pulled me into the office and canned me for poor performance. I always thought it was because I walked in on them pulling names and numbers from different state phone books. They didn't have my final check ready that day. Next Monday, when I called in to make sure they had it, someone I didn't recognize answered, but told me to come down for my check. It turns out they got raided for that whole scammy plan bit. I had a brief interview with an FBI agent, and they handed me my final check, and the place got closed down. Apparently, I missed out on a whole crazy entry scene when the feds came in the front and the back to grab the management team. I think you missed one of the more satisfying things it's possible to witness in life, and one that we all wish we could see. Seeing a crappy boss get cuffed and pushed out of the building into a waiting armored truck. The rest of us have to settle for dreaming that about our high school fast food jobs. I got fired from Borders because the person that was covering for me while I was on vacation got fired. What's even more messed up, I didn't even find out directly from them. Jose's girlfriend, she also worked there, texted me saying, "Hey, Jose got fired and you should probably call them because they've been expecting you." I called and the store manager was like, "Yeah, you're terminated. You can come in and pick up your last check." I didn't even bother arguing because I was going to give my 2 weeks notice when I got back anyway, because I was sick of their bullcrap. Joke's on them, they went out of business. As a backpacker in Australia around 2005 or 2006, I got a job working for a motivational speaker and life coach who was also a predatory fraudster. Basically, people would come to his free session on a Saturday, and then, if they were interested, they'd leave their number for people like me to call them back and try to sell the paid weekend to them. Our script included things like how to advise people who said they couldn't afford it on how they could use their social welfare payments to pay for it. Really scummy. Anyway, on one call, a guy straight up asks me if this fellow was a fraud. And I said, "Between you and me, I think he is." Just as the supervisor walked past, she tapped me on the shoulder and whispered, "Make your last call," hung up and left. Really wish I could remember his name. Michael something. Scumbag. And we were in the main dressing room all week, but had to leave on the weekend because Alice Cooper was playing and needed the dressing room. We were moved to the hospitality suite near the stage, so we were trying to sell this bullcrap course with Alice Cooper blasting out in the background. Worked in a stockroom of a large, cheap clothing company. I was around 15 or 16. It was the most boring, mind-killing job involving moving boxes, unpacking boxes, unloading trucks, packaging boxes, and more boxes. It was mostly teenagers working to earn some pocket money. You try to make the shift go faster. I brought my MP3 player one day so I could listen to some music through headphones, but that wasn't allowed. So the intercom radio kept playing the same songs over and over. I think it was Scissor Sisters, I Don't Feel Like Dancing, and James Morrison, You Give Me Something. Anyways, one early Saturday morning shift I was working with a colleague my age. We had to unpack a load of carts with boxes. You know how kids are, we started messing around. throwing the boxes to each other like volleyballs, a manager came by and sent us to his office. We were told to leave and to not come back. That was actually a good day. I worked there for 3 months and I hated every second of it. Operations manager here. On the day of the Christmas dinner for the company, I texted one of the new employees who didn't show up at the restaurant we were having dinner at. This employee was with us for 2 months and was hired even after having bad reviews from previous employers, but still thought I'd give him a chance because we were in a pinch. His previous employer said he had issues getting to work or getting to work on time. He had no driver's license, so I asked one of the other employees with the company vehicle to pick him up in the morning, and sometimes he literally had to be woken up. Circling back to the day of the Christmas dinner, he replied saying that he'll need roughly a 38% raise from his current salary, otherwise he's quitting, because this other company offered him a job. I thanked him for his time with us and enjoyed the rest of my evening. A couple of months later, he called begging for his job back, and you all know what my answer was. One year, I was working at a summer camp. It was my first year, but a bunch of people had been going for years. This year, it was a brand new director, and she was useless, regularly telling us she was too busy to do her job. Often told us that if she did the hiring, she would have gotten better employees. Told people that we can't get mad at kids and needed to use positive reinforcement. Then, when they got in trouble, just took them away and did nothing. Completely useless woman. There was one incident the day before this where one kid got 3 fingers like claws and scratched another while transitioning to the afternoon care, when the day staff were supposed to go to the office and plan activities for the next day. We were all inside when this happened, and so was the director who was actually supposed to be helping outside. Our director and regional manager came out the next day and gave written warnings to a bunch of people for being inside during our planning time. One of the 4 guys working at our camp, 37 employees and 4 were male, including me, stood up and said it was crap that we got written warnings for doing what we were told during training. But they didn't care, they wanted a scapegoat. He got angry and got fired on the spot for speaking up against our director, who was fired 3 weeks later for sucking at her job. In high school, my friend, whose nickname was the most common term for green herb we know, was scratching his package with his hand down the inside of his pants while flipping burgers at McDonald's. The owner stepped around the corner, saw him, and fired him in seconds. Are you telling me that's all it would have taken for me to get out of my fast food jobs? Oh, who am I kidding? That small-town food court restaurant would have had to actually catch me biblically desecrating the food before they'd go through the effort of finding a new staff member. Not me, but I witnessed it. Guy not only fired, but they had cops on site to escort him out. He was let go for a multitude of reasons. 1. Clocked in via phone, proceeds to show up 1 hour after his shift starts, and then leaves 1 hour early and clocks out via his phone again. 2. New access codes to vending machines, so he was stealing change out of them. Not all of it, but enough for discrepancies to be noticed. 3. Put paper towels on light bulbs in the bathroom. Stuffed paper towels down sink in break room so that he could be the hero who noticed the stuff prior to it causing a disaster. 4. General disrespect for his fellow employees. 5. Taking care of lax overtime policies and not actually working the overtime. This just happened. I was working for a small startup with an absolute C-word of a boss. He'd yell, demand 110% from his employees while he could barely afford to pay us. Paychecks were never on time, and he'd constantly demean me. He was an all-around misogynist. I talked back one time, when he asked me, "How often are you on time to work?" and I responded, "How often do we get paid on time?" And the next day he texted me to bring my keycard and keys to work and fired me. Good riddance. I've never felt better. It seriously felt like I was released from prison. I saw someone get fired on the spot because he said he wanted to rage F a co-worker of ours. He was an idiot. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I got someone fired on the spot. As a kid, I went to the library on my bike and it got stolen. Months later, I saw it in the back of a friendly's near the employee parking. I called the police since I'd already filed a report with them. Easy to identify since it had some pretty unique features, like a custom valve cap I found once, and the handbrake on the left side didn't work. Police asked the manager if he knew who came in on the bike, and he said it was one of the cooks. They informed him it was stolen from me, so the manager called him over and berated him pretty badly while they put cuffs on him and promised to call all the other local restaurants so they wouldn't hire him either. Pretty sure he said, "I knew you were a fricking loser, but stealing a kid's bike? Really? You're 25, you prick." I think he ended up getting community service. I was already quitting. I put in my 30 days when working for an IT consulting firm, while I was allocated to work in a financial institution. I hated it there. I'd been there for 3 months, but I'd been working for the consulting firm for 1.5 years, and I got a much better offer to move up to project management, which was an amazing step for me. The financial institution was notified that I'd put in my 30 days during my lunch hour by the consulting firm. I was told I could leave when I came back from lunch. The consulting firm let me go as well, since they wouldn't need me for anything else just for those 30 days. Which was cool. I called my new boss and he told me I could start sooner if I wanted to. Took a 1-week vacation between jobs and then I started. I worked in a medical office, trying to be vague about the specialty, and the doctor was doing horrifically illegal things that were putting patients at risk for damages and disease. Things like having an unlicensed employee performing duties that they shouldn't be and not practicing proper hand washing or instrument sterilization, among other things. Not to mention the doctor was rude and would frequently yell at staff. During my employment, I brought attention to things that were being done and confronted the doctor in front of the rest of the staff. She fired me on the spot. I'd been keeping record of infractions as they were revealed, and a lot of the more awful things that were hush-hush, and I turned them into the office of the Attorney General in my state. Just a few weeks ago, I found out that the doctor has been telling people that I was fired for trying to recruit people into a cult. I'm an atheist. My job had people come and go like it was a drive-through. We had one guy who was down that same path. He came in and started cutting the pizzas. I was helping him and he was a nice guy. Skip forward a couple of weeks and this guy is a master. Even during rush, he still has time to pick up orders. The manager comes in and asks him how he's liking his job. He says that he's glad he works there. Manager fires him on the spot. We get a new guy in and the cycle continues. I was working in a USPS priority shipping center during Christmas break from college back in 2002. It's fairly brutal work, tossing packages non-stop for an entire 8-hour shift from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I know, it's not a gulag or anything, but to a spoiled 20-year-old at the time, I recall hating it. So there's this massive conveyor belt structure that basically runs the entire length of this titanic warehouse. It's huge, kid, and they would store a ton of carts and other miscellaneous junk under there for storage. So naturally, I took to hiding out underneath it whenever the opportunity arrived. Pretty shifty thing to do, but alas, I was young and foolish. This went on for a good week when I decided to get bold and took to laying down inside a pushcart and covered myself up for what I'd hoped would be a brief nap. It's loud and a little cold, so I thought I'd be good. But nope. Slept for a good 4 hours only to awaken to a search party sent out to see if I'd died under the belt. The boss applauded my bold action but showed me the door all the same. Haha, pretty cool boss to actually credit you on getting out of your crappy job even as he gave you the boot. Sounds like he probably understood it wasn't a fun place to be. Not all antagonists are mean. At a place where I worked, people came to me saying someone was making creepy comments about my body, and they'd told HR about it. So when I got called in, I said, well, yeah, that makes me uncomfortable. And the person got fired on the spot. It was a huge deal because everyone knew about it. I'd only been working there for a little less than a year, and they'd been there for over 10. Almost a decade ago, I was in my apprenticeship to become an electrical planner. I'm Swiss. Over here, your first apprenticeship is very important, and it's hard to get any job at all if you don't have at least one apprenticeship done. As a result, there was big pressure in my last year of school to get a place. Initially, I wanted to do computer technician, but I just couldn't land a hit, so I had to start looking into other jobs. Eventually, I landed a job as an aforementioned planner. Let's not mince words. Not only did I hate the actual work right away, I also hated my boss, and most of my co-workers. Initially, I just thought I would soldier my way through. Finishing your first apprenticeship is so important. I managed a little more than a year before I started to get depressed, to the point that my parents were starting to notice and my mother got on my case. I started missing work. I had a doctor that was very liberal in handing out a sick notice for 1 to 2 weeks straight. So I'd work for a month or so, miss like 10 days of work, and then work another month or so. My grades started to drop and I actually started to give my boss and co-workers lip for being so crappy to me. For context, I was a glorified maid. Every morning I had to take a 20-minute trip to the local bakery and get everyone their foodstuffs for the break. I frequently got shouted at if the stuff they wanted was already sold out. Well, why didn't you leave earlier? Because I'm already leaving almost an hour before the break actually starts, And then people would complain that the stuff wasn't warm anymore. Then twice a day I had to make coffee for everyone. They'd frequently change their mind on the order and then berate me for screwing stuff up. Often they'd complain even if I did exactly as they asked. You put too much sugar in. No, you just can't properly decide on how much you want. You asked for 3 and I put in 3. And probably the most offensive, I just couldn't do anything right. I was an apprentice. I earned maybe 1/10 of what the others made. And part of that deal is that you're allowed to screw up and then taught how to do it properly. No such luck, I was basically required to learn everything by myself or Google it, and then I'd get 60-minute sessions of beratement for not doing the work properly. The final straw was on a Friday. I had to leave around 4 p.m. at the latest so I could catch my train home. So I started cleaning everything at around 3 p.m. 5 minutes before I planned to leave, I just finished cleaning the office floor, whereafter one of my co-workers walks in wearing muddy and snowy shoes. It was February, I think, ruining the entire floor all over again. I packed my stuff. The boss came in and demanded I stay to clean up. I don't remember my exact words, but it was said very loudly and would probably get me banned from most places online if I put it in the story. When I came back on Monday, my boss told me to get out immediately. I remember laughing the whole way home. I was free. Probably one of the best days of my teenage life. Joke's on him anyway. I still had a bunch of stuff I was supposed to bring to the post office in my backpack. Held on to it for a few weeks in case they asked for it and then ritually burnt it in the hopes of some elder god smiting the office. It didn't happen, but it was satisfying nonetheless. Not me, but my co-worker at Subway got fired after giving her friend free food and paying for it immediately afterwards. Perfect. This just happened to me in September. I was a marketing manager at a fairly large digital advertising agency. I showed up to work on Wednesday at the same time I always did. Nothing out of the ordinary. My direct manager from the office up north was in for a strategy meeting. He and I sat down with my team and did some Q2 number reviews, goal setting, strategy for the remainder of 2018, talked about the pros and cons and how hopeful and optimistic he was. Then it was back to work as usual. About 2 hours later, he calls me into the conference room. I bring my laptop to take notes and figure we're going to go over more numbers or something. I look to my right at the end of the long conference room table, and the SVP of operations was sitting there, albeit with an uncomfortable, scared look on his face. They tell me to close the door. My manager said, "We've decided today is your last day." Didn't really give me any good reason why, but I found out it was a few days before earnings call and they'd missed their projected quarter numbers, and I was the most expensive employee on the team. I didn't push the crappy store credit cards enough. I was pulled off the till by a manager and he asked why I didn't try to sign the customer up for a card. He was watching us. I told them the customers don't want them, or should we push them? I'm sure if they want them, they'll ask. I was pulled into the office and fired or, quote, laid off because they didn't need extra staff, and that I was a problem child, as he worded it, because screw actual customer service and making sure the store doesn't look like a war zone. Look who's laughing now, Sears. This was 7 years ago. 6 months was way too long to work at a crap place like that. They destroyed themselves. I'm glad so many others have the same opinion. They preyed on people who didn't understand credit terms, who had bad credit, or were new to the country. How can you sign someone up so quickly for a crazy high-interest card and have a conscience? Daily, we had people coming to the register with bills not knowing what they were getting billed for, or totally confused by the card and getting angry by the high interest and card fees. I was told by management when I was fired that in 6 months I'd only signed up or did applications for 3 people, when it should have been closer to 1,300. Yes, 1,300. Even though so many of my shifts were before store hours doing price changes or cleaning. The store could look like a bomb went off and they'd rather push crappy cards. I got in trouble because I spent so much time helping customers and cleaning up the clothing. Yes, for things most stores require. My mum, brother and I were at Olive Garden about 20 years ago. We had the worst waiter in the history of the world. He was outrageously rude to the point of being downright mean to us. At the end of the dinner, my mum left him a dime for a tip, and as we were leaving, the waiter threw the dime at my mum. I was a little kid, otherwise I probably would have at least attempted to defend her. The waiter's boss saw the dime throw and fired the waiter on the spot. Everyone has a bad day, but that guy was just awful. What's the most nobody knows job that pays really good amounts of money? Nuclear divers. They make repairs in nuclear reactors. It's actually not very dangerous if you don't do it a lot. Water is a very good shield against radiation, and the divers receive a relatively small dose if you compare it to the background radiation we all get during a year of just living our lives. You only have to work once every few months because of the amount of radiation you receive, and you can make up to $100,000 per year. Tube operators. Tube is in the British subway. Because the job is so depressing, whoever takes on the job actually gets paid quite a decent amount. However, the conditions are actually awful. Underground means not much lighting. The air is stuffy and there is no one to talk to. You can make a good amount of money and you don't have to talk to people? I'm currently applying for British citizenship. Unfortunately, you'll have to start as a station attendant or something similar. Driver is the top of the transport for London career ladders. You get paid pretty well, like £60,000 per year, but that's as high as you can go. Plus, there's always the chance some poor human being will jump in front of your train. As far as part-time work, I work valet and make around $30 per hour on average. It's a ton when it's literally the easiest job in the world. Shut off your brain and run for cars. The timpanist, or kettle drummer of the orchestra, gets paid really well. Only the first violin gets paid more. It turns out that keeping those kettle drums tuned requires an enormous amount of skill. Maybe this is common knowledge, but I just learned that UPS drivers get compensated pretty well. I've got a friend who's a UPS driver. Can confirm the pay is decent, but he works his butt off. Loads of vacation as well. The catch? It's somewhat like the career of a professional athlete. Big money while you're doing it, but it won't last forever. Old UPS drivers are extremely rare. An important thing to keep in mind with all these jobs is that you should also say where you are. Cost of living is a thing. The worrisome part is that people forget about this in real life too. I have a relative who used to hire people for a government bureau in DC. He said there was no shortage of people who thought they were going to be making bank for an entry-level position based on the salary, and not considering that $75K in DC is not the same as $75K in their small hometown or college town. This is very true. Where I live, that's a lot, but inner city New York? No way, Jose, you'd be living hand to mouth on that. College girlfriend's parents both played in a major city orchestra and got paid more than $100K. Both had PhDs in music. My dad is a physician and my mum is a nurse anesthetist, a job which pays just as much as lots of doctors make, and many don't know it. Just take a master's. Specialist welders. My brother in the southeast makes $250,000 plus to do welding on nuclear projects. He has to have security clearance and a bunch of unique training. He works ridiculous hours in spurts, but has a lot of downtime when a project is either being treated or he's waiting on some special metal to arrive. I've heard of underwater welders making similar money, but they have to live on a rig and most of it is really just hazard pay. Underwater welding is super dangerous and bad for your body. You get paid well because you usually die before you reach 60 because of being exposed to hazardous chemicals. Celebrity dog walker. Technically not no one knows and more of a no one notices job. I'm from Singapore and my uncle sells Hainanese chicken rice as a hawker at $2.50 a plate. Even though the working conditions look rough, he rakes in more than $150K a year. Wow. Might consider taking over his business if I flunk university. Some people are questioning these figures. Well, I'd say that his stall is rather popular and manages to sell about a couple of hundred plates during the lunch and dinner crowd. He works through weekends too, where he gets most of the business. I'm amazed at how much you guys are interested in knowing more about Singapore and where the stall is. Well, Singapore does have a high cost of living, if you're talking about housing and cars, but $150K is definitely enough for you to lead a comfortable life. Although, as some of you have correctly pointed out, his working hours are madness. He wakes up at 4 a.m. every single day to prepare the chicken, the rice, and to set up his stall, and goes home at around 11 p.m. He can't hire workers as well, because he has to protect his recipe. Tech for events. The grunts do okay, but the guys with any skill do well. Corporate events pay better, but concerts don't build themselves. Like anywhere, you'll run into cheap employers. This is a red flag. You might not get paid at all. Avoid these buttholes. There are plenty of gigs that pay well on time. Ask your entertainment union what skills they pay the most for and what they need most. It won't be steady for a while, but get your name out there. If you want a company gig, ask which companies they'd work for if they wanted that sort of gig. You'll learn a lot from what they say, regardless of what you choose to do. Right now, I'm making $60 an hour to scratch my butt. Nothing next week, but that's okay with me. Every job done on a cruiser or a trading vessel will be paid far more than the same job on land. Plus, you don't have to spend any money. I've never met a cruise ship employee that looked happy. They all had the fake Disney smiles going on. Except the entertainment. Those guys spend like 90% of the time hitting on women at the bar. Do cruise ships need IT? I should be more specific. I'm not looking to go back into desktop support. I was thinking more systems administration, which is what I do now. Surprisingly, yeah. Modern cruise ships have a pretty extensive IT infrastructure, and it has all the same problems as on land with the unique problems of being on sea for days at a time. Be aware that it's a pretty grim job at times, since you're sometimes tracing down cabling through conduits that you can often find dead rats in, or some horrible slime that seems to accumulate in places on cruise ships, where they never seem to actually get washed or painted. I've never done the at-sea job, but I did a lot of consulting work on infrastructure upgrades on some cruise ships many years ago. I talked to the onboard IT guys and they told me some horror stories. And to be honest, the IT stuff seems to be the exception to the rules set beforehand. The pay isn't actually any better than on land and is often worse. The free food and cheap drinks are still okay, but bear in mind that you're on call all the time while the ship's at sea. And when in port, you'll rarely, if ever, get on land. You'll also become the de facto desktop support for the rest of the crew, and often the passengers. It's also worth noting that they're mostly looking for more entry-level people for the onboard crew. They rely mostly on consultants to build properly redundant systems that'll survive at sea. And when it breaks, they'll switch to the redundant backup and leave the failed hardware and systems until they get back to shore and can get a consultant to come back on board to fix it. And bear in mind that my experience was some years ago. I know even then they were looking to outsource as much of their IT as possible, and so these days it's likely IT on a cruise ship is heavily outsourced. I've heard you can make some pretty crazy money working on oil rigs. The hours are insane, you have to leave home for a while and the job sucks, but apparently you can make a killing doing it. Yeah, but dying can also be a problem there. I mean, done deal, sign me up. Oh, you poor phlegmatic and passionless people crack me up. However, I can't imagine any fate on one of those things would be entirely pain-free. Industrial accident or dying in a fire is a lose in my books. Being a court reporter pays extremely well. I live in Texas. The salaries for court reporters here average $75K and up, including retirement and paid vacation time. Even as a freelance deposition reporter, you can make upwards of $100K if you put in the time. It's definitely a skill though. You need to have a strong command of the English language. The theory behind writing on steno machines is also incredibly unique. You will need to be able to alter your normal ways of spelling to be able to write correctly. In Texas, there is a state certification that must be passed before you can be licensed. Texas requires you to write at a speed of 225 strokes per minute for at least 5 minutes. The test is definitely a huge barrier for a lot of people to get licensed. People who clean up crime and accident scenes. Someone shot themselves in the head in your house? Old lady died and wasn't found for a few weeks? The medical examiner and emergency teams will come and take the body, but all of that blood, leaked fluid, bits of crap, and complete nastiness, yep, that's on you to deal with. Enter people who clean up scenes like this for a living, and they can charge whatever they want, because can you really put a price on not having to deal with that mess yourself? Elevator tradesman. An older brother of a friend of mine had this job and did indeed make a very good living. The only real catch was that he was almost always on call. We'd be hanging out at like 11 p.m., pounding beer and playing video games, and then the older brother would go take a leak and come back in his work jumpsuit like, "Gotta go fix an elevator, be right back. Thanks for adding the drunk elevator technicians to my list of things I worry about killing me now." Not only does it pay well, but we really need some new blood in the masonry industry. People, if you don't like school, don't go to college, learn a trade. My dad used to shoot wildlife that would stray onto airport runways, and he was on about $65K a year if I recall correctly. A buddy of mine did that. They replaced him with a falcon. Sales professional at a luxury retail store. I worked at a jewelry store in Las Vegas making over $100K a year and being under 30 years old. If you're with the right company and in the right city, commission is limitless. Being in the right location for the right brand is also important here. Though both would technically be luxury jewelry salespeople, there's a difference between working at a major brand in or near a major city versus working at a K Jewelers in a strip mall near a sleepy suburban town. The sexton of a church who gets paid a substantial salary, with benefits and pension, to ring the steeple bells on the hour. Between bell-ringing sessions, he polishes the brass in the church and gets it ready for funerals, weddings, and weekend services. But most of the time, he acts as a tour guide for those visiting the building on weekdays who want to see the church's original Tiffany stained glass windows. Some people put down trade jobs such as plumbing, welder, etc. because they don't require a college degree. After completing trade school, and if you're accepted into a union, you can make more than a decent amount of money and have great benefits to go with it. There are more alternatives than college where you can make a living for yourself, and getting a trade is a great alternative. On top of getting a good job, you also avoid the student debt. Be aware that some occupations are tough on the body. You may not like it so much after kneeling on roofs for 20 years. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Health economist. The field of health economics didn't really take off until the late 90s, and it's booming as of today. OECD countries are starting to realize they need more efficient ways to manage and organize their healthcare systems. Countries like Italy are still at ground zero when it comes to economic evaluation of medication or technologies, diagnostic tests, treatments, among other things. The prime example is the UK, which has a completely separate body called NICE to carry out evaluations for the NHS. People with a master's or PhD in health economics are in massive shortage and wanted by pretty much every international organization or technological consultancy or government body, and of course, by pharmaceutical companies as well, and they're paid very, very well. My source? I'm a health economist working for a major international organization. Driving a commuter train in Toronto, Canada, pays $80,000 a year. I mean, you can be high on white snow, you just have to watch your speed. Seems about as good a time as any to remind everyone that any advice given out in these videos is generally free speech compliant stories submitted via the internet. Personally, the narrator does not recommend working any sort of machinery, let alone commuter vehicles, while doing that or any other substance. My father is a welder and has done work as a plumbing assistant. He's always worked factory or machine operator type jobs, but he always had a steady side gig by doing welding and fabricating on the side out of his backyard shop. When he'd get laid off, as is common in factory work, he'd just ramp up the welding to full-time. When I needed veneers for my teeth as a preteen due to staining from medication I had to take as a child, the insurance deemed it as cosmetic and wouldn't pay. It was $900 a tooth and I needed 4 of them. He made the money in 2 months out of the backyard shop. I don't have a college degree, but I make around $70K in Wisconsin. Industrial inspection, NDE or NDT, mostly checking high-pressure welds with X-ray, magnetics, etc. Downside is the hours. I'll end up working around 80 this week, and you don't always know your schedule, but it's alright for a mid-20s guy without kids or too many responsibilities. Took me about 2.5 years to get to this level. Started around $13 an hour and now around 25. Company paid for me to go to class and get my certifications, which is how you get the raises. I was a merchandise roadie. Upfront pay was between $100 to $200 a day. My per diem was $6 to $20 a day. International travel was free. Our accommodation in hotels and tour bus bunks were free as well, and you could rent a place anywhere you like because it's not like you're commuting. Travel from your location to the starting point of the tour is usually free, though living within an hour of the capital city helped me get work, as a lot of tours started there. Food was free. Alcohol was also free. You had to pay for your own substances, though, unless you were a hot girl. Riding around with bands on tour buses, accruing stories and seeing the world, hard labor every day. Your job is sometimes excruciatingly hectic. I was once in Cologne and sold 13,000 euros worth of 3 Doors Down t-shirts in one night on my own, but in a sense, free. I toured with Adele 3 times, LaRue 3 times, Lenny Kravitz, Interpol, Red Hot Chili Peppers, and tons more. Smaller acts were way more fun, especially metal bands, but nobody gets excited when you say you toured with AmITheA for 2 months. God, that was the best part. Between the ages of 19 and 27, I toured constantly until I gave it up to make an animated series. Now I'm 30 and we're about to start pitching a new pilot. Pipe fitters. Sort of a different version of an HVAC R-Tech, primarily focusing on industrial and commercial. In Colorado, a good pipe fitter can make $75K a year before any overtime, by the time they're 22 or 23. That's with basically no student debt accrued. It's a job that's always in demand too. It can be a tough job, but you'll never hurt for work. No idea if this is true or not, but when I was in the army, we were told that parachute riggers, the people who pack parachutes, work by just having a certain quota of chutes they have to pack per day. Apparently it's a very boring task, and the longer they keep going, the more likely a mistake will be made. Because of this, the guys who've been doing it for years and are really good at it complete their quota for the day in about 2 or 3 hours, so they're home every day by 11. I know a guy who's an emergency medical technician for an overnight shift at an oil rig in Alaska, I believe. He sits on Path of Exile all night in his trailer with Wi-Fi and a laptop. He's been working for 2 years and has had 3 calls, one of which was only a bear walking around in the vicinity of the outer fence. Makes about $200,000 a year. Repairing equipment in a clean room. No education necessary. Very rare to see a tech with a degree. The clean room is kept at 65 degrees Fahrenheit, you're wearing a full suit over your street clothes, and everything you work on requires gloves, so your hands stay dirt and callus-free. Don't tell my boss, but the job is actually fun. I'm sitting right now with my coworkers and I read them this question. We all agree our job as independent insurance adjusters should be added to this. We're currently working auto flood claims for cars damaged from Hurricane Matthew. Our pay rate is $39 an hour and $58.50 overtime per hour. Anything over 40 hours is overtime, by the way. We're working 7 days a week, 11 hours a day, so it's very lucrative. There is travel involved and you never know how long any particular deployment will last, but I recently finished up a 2-year deployment working a desk job making a similar rate, although that was only 6 days a week. I crap you not, a professional determining whether a young chicken is a male or female can earn $60K a year. At least according to an article I was reading in Business Insider a while back, so take that for what it is. I mean, that's not retire early money, but I think it's crazy high for feeling chicken bits for a living. Actuaries. Not truly no one knows per se, but a lot of people aren't really aware of them. Let me save you some time. The examinations are brutal, you'll cry and hate yourself unless you're a masochist who loves numbers. As a student taking these exams currently, I can concur. There are so many and they will continually get more difficult. The narrator has just read up on what this is, and no thank you. Being slaughtered in school and then subject to lawsuits when you inevitably fail to predict market upheaval sounds like it's not worth it in my book. Working on a billionaire's yacht. They don't drive, cook, or clean or serve themselves. I have a friend whose father is British and his mother is Japanese. He grew up in China for most of his life, but spent a few years in America and some in Japan. He's naturally fluent in Japanese, Chinese, and English. He works for some Chinese company and is essentially the assistant for any big-name people who travel for business. His salary isn't anything incredible, like $75K, but he sometimes goes weeks without working, and when he travels with them, he's treated as an equal and gets to eat and drink at some of the finest restaurants in the world and stays in amazing hotels. Radiologist. Most people don't know what we really do or our contribution to their care, so much so that the American College of Radiology put out a campaign, Face of Radiology. A white guy can pretty much go to China and get paid to be a white guy, either teaching English, no teaching experience required, just need to speak English, or being paid to sit in on business meetings pretending to be an American investor. Giant crane operators make tons of money. Even small crane operators can do pretty well. Being a flight attendant for one of the good international airlines. My friend works for Emirates, and it's pretty much the ideal job for someone without a family. The salary is awesome, you only work about 14 days a month, you travel the world for free and enjoy mini vacations wherever you go, stay in 5-star hotels for free, get set up in a luxury apartment in Dubai for free, get discounts on international flights for you and your family, among other things. They had a yearly open call where everyone who fits the requirements can apply. They usually make announcements on their website and Facebook page. That's how she got in. They're pretty picky though. If you pass the initial screening, you have to get through a series of interviews that get more and more selective each round, so only a handful of people get the job in the end. Anesthesiologist's assistant. They work under the direction of licensed anesthesiologists, specialist physicians, and as part of the anesthesia care team. They start at $120K and move up to $160K per year. Custom cabinetry construction. On average, assuming the craftsman already has the tools on hand and knows how to make boxes already, the cost of custom making the average plywood kitchen cabinetry set, top and bottom cabinets including all wood, stains, handles and screws, not including countertop, runs about $700 to $900 in material costs, not including the labor. However, due to making the doors custom, they can charge upwards of $20 to $50K for a few days of work. There's a lot more to it, but the actual material and skill cost for making a bunch of boxes is way lower than what the average homeowner is being charged for custom kitchen cabinetry. Plus, there's a crazy huge demand for custom kitchens due to HGTV. Every middle-aged housewife wants a wine fridge. A guy used to pay me $30 an hour to cremate bodies. It's easy and I just listened to music the whole time. Kinda cliche, but I had death metal on full blast while burning bodies. Pretty cool, to be honest. After working in an office setting for my entire life, I've deduced that the money has to be amazing for printer, copier, and fax machine repair people. A never-ending list of work and overtime from what I can see. I'm convinced that there's an unwritten code that requires them to leave the machine in worse condition than what they found it in. Supply chain pays well and isn't overflowing with applicants. Most people at universities have no clue this major exists. I'm a college recruiter and sometimes struggle to find qualified supply chain candidates. The reason no one at universities knows it exists is because you don't need a degree to get into it. Can you handle a project and its components from cradle to grave? Can you properly maintain an inventory to support the project? Can you keep it within, or better yet, under budget? Congrats, you're winning at supply chain. My source? 5 years in supply chain management with a defense contractor. No degree or previous experience. Got no gag reflex? Enjoy other people's number twos? Have your scuba certification? Become a construction diver. Make $10,000 to dive into wetted structures at the wastewater treatment plant. You're usually done in about 4 hours. Well, 6 if you count the shower. It's a tough job to find, but being a technical writer for imported things. My job was to take the directions included with the Chinese-made DIY furniture, which were in horribly translated English, and rewrite them to make sense to the average English speaker. I did it informally and got a couple of grand per assignment, but the company I did it for went out of business, and I wouldn't even know where to look for that kind of job again. I found it through a relative the first time. What's a toxic behavior disguised as a virtue? Mum says several people on her Facebook are angry that they were told their services weren't needed when they signed up to town's volunteer services to help folk during the crisis. We had an amazing number of people come forward. They're mad because they want to help and do their bit. And honestly, she realized so many of them are the ones who do charity drives and stuff like that, just to show off how much of a #good person they are, and to have others praise them for being a #good person. The ones we know who are helping are getting on and doing it. Odd picture or post, but certainly not what these people would be doing. This weirdly applies to the service industry as well. People will literally throw tips at a barista to prove that they're a #good person after just belittling us. They get angry when we say at our store we can't accept tips, because how are they supposed to get that good person fix now? It's so weird and gross. The opposite of this also exists. There are people who crap on others for genuinely just trying to do the right thing and claim that they just do it to seem like a good person. Especially on the internet, the terms SJW, white knight, or simp have lost all meaning due to this. Supporting a person to a fault. In other words, being an enabler. Especially when they call it loyalty. People will defend the most effed up crap from their friends and be like, I'm loyal. Like, no. Call out your friends for being crap when they are. When people get involved in and regulate other people's relationships, they try to act like they're helping, but they always make it worse. Grand romantic gestures. I teach high school and it's crazy how many times you see a kid basically bully their crush into being with them. They make this huge public display and the kid is too shy to say no in front of everyone. It's embarrassing and distressing for that poor kid. I had a guy surprise me with a date. He lied and said our friends would be there. It was just him, me, and a horror movie. He brought me a necklace and chocolates. If we'd actually been dating, it might have been a nice romantic gesture. We weren't. We were barely friends. Hollywood can definitely warp the ideas of boundaries and consent. I can't see that working in this day and age. Or maybe it never worked in the first place, I'm not sure. I do know that if anyone tried it on me, I would be mortified, he says, beating off hordes of imaginary admirers with a stick. Overstudying, overburdening, and excessive academic anxiety and self-doubt does not make for a dedicated pupil, but an unbalanced and miserable human being instead. This is so common in Asia, the whole competitive environment of those studying more and getting better grades. Was watching a YouTuber earlier talk about how journaling during quarantine has helped him get through some old traumas, and he said one of the issues that it brought up was this. It was really jarring for me to hear that he's basically got PTSD from exam taking and Asian study culture. If the YouTuber didn't mention, or just if you haven't heard, I'd urge you to look up just how important tests in Asian countries can be. Anything from bribing police to ignore cheating, to parents climbing buildings to help their kids cheat. It's honestly unbelievable, and I can 100% imagine that stress seriously affecting someone. People saying that they did stuff that directly affects us without our permission for looking after your best interests. I have a similar neighbor. His thing is speed limits. He stands at the edge of his driveway shouting at cars that he thinks are going too fast. He makes his own unofficial speed limit signs, and he complains to each neighbor about how all the other neighbors ignore him. My neighbor really just needs a cause to fill his time. I wish he'd take up needlepoint or model ships. Self-sacrifice. Sometimes, sacrificing some of your time and energy is important. But you've got to remember that if someone or something is important to you, it doesn't mean you should cut pieces off yourself or burn yourself out for it. It goes double for if you're caring for someone. If that something or someone is that important to you, you need to make sure that the support you're giving remains consistent and sustainable and doesn't take you out. We often forget that in many cases, when you're caring for someone, that person's well-being is also tied to your well-being. And if your well-being suffers, that person you're caring for will suffer as well. And if they're worth caring for, they'll notice that you're suffering, and it won't be great for them either. The workaholic. It's fine to work hard at something you love, but not at the expense of everything else. Especially if you use it to put down everyone else who knows how to set boundaries. Teacher culture is like this so much. I know we lack a lot of supplies, but I've got 3 kids. I don't have $500 to spend at Target at the beginning of the year, and 3 days to come in and decorate my room to the perfect school colors. I leave at the end of the contract time, and I work from home after the kids go to bed. But since the others don't see me stay at school until 7 or 8, apparently I'm not working. If you don't sponsor clubs for nothing and work yourself to the bone, you're not a good teacher, apparently. My test scores are phenomenal, but I get so much crap for not volunteering to chaperone a dance. Persistence in relationships. It's always sold in rom-coms and in relationships, but usually your persistence is a complete lack of respect for other people's boundaries or holding on to things that aren't working out. When you tell people how you're feeling, to vent, or when they ask how you're doing in general, and then they one-up you to make you feel like you don't get to feel tired or sad or stressed because they are clearly having a harder time of it than you are. I was tired from school and work one day, and I told my old roommate that I was feeling a little tired. And he hits me with, "Oh, you're tired? I only had 5 hours of sleep and I had to wake up early this morning because I had PT." He's in the Reserve Officers Training Corps. People that do good deeds so that they can brag about it or use it to their own advantage. "Look at me, I'm such a good person. I do all these nice things. Not because I wanted to be a good person or anything. Nope, just so I could tell everyone about all the good things I do. Repeatedly. Like all the time. Because I'm a good person, remember? Hey, by the way, could you do me a favor?" Telling kids that they're so different than anyone else while implying that they're somehow better. The actual healthy thing to do is just stress that everyone is unique and the kids' natural gifts make them who they are, just like other kids' gifts make them unique. Working for exposure. This one gets me because companies use it as an excuse to not pay someone or not pay them the amount they deserve. They claim exposure is your payment, but last I checked, exposure doesn't pay the bills. The entire "I have a strong personality" kind of people, and then when they follow that up with "people either love me or hate me," you know that it's heavily weighted to the hate side. My boss excuses her really crappy and just plain mean behavior as a strong personality. Nope, you're just a butthole. Yeah, I've never met a person like this where it wasn't code for "I'm heavily unpleasant to be around." Take your strong personality and use that strength to hurl yourself to a different locale, please. The rise and grind mentality, saying that if you're not working towards something, you're wasting your time. It's important to take time to relax or pursue a passion without monetary gain, but society as a whole has deemed this as wasting your time. My boss tells me he only reads inspirational self-help books to get better at sales, and that's what he wants me to read. I just tell him that the books I like are fantasy, sci-fi, and historical. I'm really not interested in some rich guy telling me how to do relationship marketing, a chapter in and this author is just blabbling about his boating trip with his friend. For me, I don't see it as me doing certain activities that are just wasting time or would be considered pointless. Yeah, I'm not working towards making more money or improving my reputation or whatever's considered monetary gain, but you know what this activity that brings me enjoyment does work towards? My happiness and well-being. You know what you can't do when you're not mentally all in order and it's hard for you to function as a healthy human? Make monetary gains. Am I saying be lazy and always do what you want to do and always try to do something fun? No. But life isn't all about money. I don't care how much fricking money I make if I'm miserable. Family comes first. I grew up thinking that I had a very close extended family until I realized how crappy and miserable most of them were. I've cut them out and feel so much better about it. That kind of hustle culture where successful people give motivational speeches, or more often Instagram captions, where they say stuff like, if you're not succeeding, you're not working hard enough, or we all have the same 24 hours. We don't all have the same 24 hours. If you have kids, subtract a couple of hours. If you have kids without a live-in nanny, subtract a whole bunch of them. If you have to work minimum wage jobs to make rent, subtract hours. If you don't have help to cook or clean or grocery shop, then subtract more hours. That's part of why Kylie Jenner's whole self-made millionaire thing bugs me. Even if she came up with her own ideas and did her portion of the work, she never had to worry about financial support to start her brand, or childcare while she was working, or who was going to cook meals for her and her kid or clean her house. Her lip fillers alone, which are a huge portion of her brand, can cost up to $2,000 a pop. You're not self-made if you couldn't have done it without your parents' money. I love Arnold Schwarzenegger for part of this reason. When speaking at a graduation ceremony, he said something to the effect of the following: I always tell people that you can call me anything you want. You can call me Arnold, you can call me Schwarzenegger, you can call me the Austrian Oak, you can call me Schwarzi, you can call me Arnie, but don't ever call me a self-made man. This is so important for you to understand. I didn't make it that far on my own. I mean, to accept the credit or that mantle would discount every single person that has helped me get here today, that gave me advice, that made an effort, that gave me time, that lifted me when I fell. It gives the wrong impressions that we can do it alone. None of us can. The whole concept of self-made man or woman is a myth. Almost no one is self-made. It's nice to be inspired and think that you can be the next big thing, but having help does go a long way. It's why people are tired of the millionaire celebrities who talk about how you just need to lace up your boots and put your time in. Meanwhile, the Paltrows of the world have nannies and chefs and personal trainers, or the Trumps of the world get a small loan of $1 million. Most common, lower or middle class people will consider it a windfall to find a sitter for an hour or two every now and then, or come into an extra $50 to make it to the next paycheck. It's hard for your average person, where you rely on each other, crash at a friend's house, ask for a quick ride somewhere, maybe $20 here and there to make it through, or ask a relative to watch the kids for an hour or two before you can make it home from work. Even then, it's not always enough. The hustle and self-made culture can be an inspiration from the right person. But when the self-made persons start crapping on people who can't make it or haven't been as lucky, it flips really quick. Humility is what's important, knowing that even if you've managed to make it with hard work and sacrifice, someone can do just as much, if not more, and still fall short. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Corporate passive-aggressive behavior. Yes, you're saying all the right things and everything checks out if read back on a transcript, but you and I both know you've simply found a way to abuse the rules for your own gain. My last boss was like this. She'd even brag about the ways she got away with it in the past. She loved to manipulate and belittle people, and this was her favorite way of doing it. What's worse is so many people could see through it, but technically she didn't do anything wrong, so she had no consequences. Toxic positivity. Basically, people who try to find the good in everything. There's a lot to be said for having a positive outlook, but it quickly becomes toxic when you start lessening the impact of people who are awful to the ones you love. For example, I'm sure your parents still loved you in their own way. Or when you trivialize people's sadness. So you got fired. It just means you need to pursue a new opportunity. Sometimes, the appropriate answer to a situation is to just acknowledge that things suck. Sometimes, other people need to vent. They don't want a solution, they don't want you to tell them it will be alright, they just want to release the tension in their chest by venting to you, and to hear you say, yeah, that is bullcrap. And a lot of the time, whoever they choose to vent to is someone they trust and are comfortable with. I usually feel a little flattered when my friends vent to me, and if there's something you think you can help them with, wait until after they vented. Let them get it out, let it calm down, and then make the suggestion. It will always go so much better. The discovery of toxic positivity has, no joke, been a real revelation to the narrator's life in recent years. Sometimes the best thing you can do for your friend is to acknowledge that things suck and ask them questions, like what they might do next. Offer your opinion on their options if they ask, and just be there and respect their feelings. People who say, "This is just the way I am. If you can't handle that, oh well." Like, no, you're wrong. I understand to an extent that if people don't like you for being yourself, they can go F themselves, but if you're a person who seriously doesn't know how to speak to people or are just rude in general and claim, that's just how I am, you're wrong. People need to know that it's not okay to be rude or obnoxious, and that you should be able to know the difference of being yourself and just being a jerk. Steve Jobs was Exhibit A for this. He was known for treating people like crap, and not just his employees at Apple. Waiters, hotel staff, whoever. And it wasn't because he didn't have it in him to be kind and generous, because he did turn that on when it suited him. He just chose not to care that his cruelty hurt people. Always being busy and constantly working hard. I have family members that call me lazy because I've created a life that doesn't revolve around constant grinding. Constantly being busy, getting up at the crack of dawn, always complaining about being tired, regularly talking about how there's just not enough time to do things they enjoy. All as if it's some badge of honor. Yes, this. When people talk to me about all the crap they have going on, and I'm sitting here with no girlfriend because I don't want the commitment, and extra person wrapped into my schedule, no house and no plans to buy one because I'm not spending the next 30 years fixing things. I don't like the word project. I hate having projects and chores. I've deliberately taken paths and choices so that I can relax as much as possible. I feel like some people look down on me for it, but F them. Being the supportive friend or significant other who'll never say no, even if it's a really bad idea. Kindly let me help you, or you'll drown, said the monkey, safely putting the fish up in a tree. Alan Watts. People who record themselves doing something nice for someone in need. I'm all for helping people, but the minute you bring your own camera crew, it loses all meaning. Yeah, I know someone like this. She's kind of a guru of kindness in some circles, but it's fake. One particularly troubling example was something she wrote about how she was so there for a dying friend. She included many photos of herself by this guy's bedside while he was in a coma, despite her totally ignoring him while he was sick and not in a coma, and wrote so much about how painful but conducive to growth this whole experience was. In reality, she's a selfish, awful person who wouldn't bend down to save a puppy drowning in a puddle without a camera around. I once saw her yell at someone for being helpful to a stranger without any fanfare. You have a Jesus complex. You're acting like being kind is nothing, like it's not a sacrifice. Probably because it tees her off every time someone is actually the way she pretends to be. Being offended on behalf of another person without knowing or wanting to know their opinion. People that say they're always 100% honest and aren't afraid to speak their mind. It's definitely useful when needed, but normally just makes a person seem insufferable and rude. Brutally honest people care more about the brutal than the honesty. Absolutely. If you're going to be honest, at least have some tact. The attitude of the person saying honest stuff can go an awfully long way depending on whether they're just being rude or they're also offering solutions too with their honest advice. Unwavering loyalty. No, sometimes people don't deserve it and you shouldn't be ashamed to let them go. Constantly being so quick to call people toxic just because you had a fight or disagreement and you don't like it. Obviously, if someone is a mental or physical bully, then sure, I've got a few people out of my life too. But the culture we've created has people cutting each other off over everything. No one learns loyalty, conflict resolution, and no one is allowed to grow. Also, too many people have become too proud to acknowledge their wrongs and say sorry when they need to. Everyone needs to relearn how to 1. Resolve conflict in a mature and rational way, and 2. Forgive each other, and 3. Apologize for your own actions. People that are always worried for you, but they are just expecting the moment you make a mistake or be under a bad situation so they can feel relieved their lives are a little better than yours. Like most things in life, an Oscar Wilde quote is relevant. Children begin by loving their parents. As they grow older, they judge them. Sometimes they forgive them. Helicopter parenting. That crap scars you, makes you unable to function like a normal adult, and struggle to make your own decisions when it comes to responsibility. Funny you should mention that. I believe we've had at least 2 videos specifically on helicopter parenting on the channel. Self-promotion aside, it sounds more horribly traumatic than the comical metaphor name would suggest. Sweeping issues under the rug for the sake of peace. In other words, being the bigger person. Over-the-top kindness often masks agenda. Charisma goes a long way toward hiding something darker. Constant self-diminishing and downplaying your abilities as humility. Just accept and recognize that you're pretty skilled and have a lot of experience in something, instead of saying that it's easy, that anyone could do the same, and the list goes on. My stepmom was a doctor, and one thing she told me that they drill into you in medical school is how to take a compliment. Because if a family thanks you for saving a loved one's life and you respond with, "Oh shucks, 'tweren't nothing," that's actually an incredibly insulting thing to say to them. The polite thing to do is graciously accept the compliment. Aggressive self-care. Sometimes people use this as a hard stop to get out of things that they don't want to do, because you can't argue with someone saying they need self-care. But there's a line between doing what you need to do in order to bolster emotional and mental health, and being lazy or taking advantage of people who want to support self-care more. Overprotectiveness. Not the general caring and protecting of someone, but a lot of people seem to think it's so adorable when someone is super overprotective over someone else. I'm not weak. I can do things by myself just fine, thanks. Ensuring success. Don't tell your kids that they'll do great things. Don't say that you'll kill it. Give people reasonable expectations and realize that they're normal. Giving and being selfless can sometimes extend to being a doormat. Some people specifically put themselves in positions to be used in order to guilt or manipulate or feel worthy and needed. Always saying what's on your mind. People who claim to have no filter are generally just rude. It's much more commendable to know when to shut the frick up. The super-ultra laid-back mentality. Not everything is okay. Not everything is a joke or is cool. It's good to have boundaries and to take things seriously. When I'm around groups of people that are overtly positive, like a workout group or something, I get crazy annoyed. Not that I'm a proponent of negativity, but I am a proponent of moderation and balance. Without negativity in a strictly positive situation, there's no balance or check. And when it's amplified by a large group of people, it quickly becomes loud and obnoxious to me. It'd be the same case if you were around a group of people that were overtly negative. The lack of balance makes me so uncomfortable. Being too quick to leap on people for perceived toxicity. One example of this is gossip. People love to say that they hate gossip, but in reality it's part of what makes us human. Gossip that is untruthful is harmful, but the rest isn't that bad. For example, if someone tells you that a person they had to work with was lazy and didn't do their part, they're venting, and it saves you from having to go through it yourself. Not being honest with people solely to make them feel good. It's kinda like 50-50 with this one. If they need the boost, then maybe, but overall it's generally a bad move. Putting people in their place. I've only ever seen insufferable drama queens and bullies use this term when referring to themselves. Respecting your elders. Respect is earned, not given. This doesn't mean that you can't show basic human decency, of course. However, I will not respect someone just because they're older than me, no matter what kind of person they are or how they treat me or make me feel. Sorry, not sorry. I don't really know how to say this eloquently. I think there's this pervasive belief in American society that speaking up when you don't like something or causing conflict is always bad or not cool. Confrontation is uncomfortable for everyone involved, but often is extremely necessary for us or society to change for the better. It seems like we always try to appease the situation we're in, and often it causes undue suffering. What's a sign that things are about to get real bad real quick? When someone who's been doing the job a whole hell of a lot longer than you have looks frustrated or nervous. My dad used to work for a pharmaceutical plant. It was dangerous work, but their foreman was always calm and had never been known to make drama out of anything, even chemical spills. One day, the foreman got a call from his wife. Their newborn daughter was in the ER, suspected meningitis, didn't look like she'd make it. He dropped the phone, said nothing, and literally ran the half-mile across the plant out to the car park to get to the hospital. When he stopped and pulled out his keys, he looked back and saw a dozen or so others running towards their own cars, including my dad. They thought that the only thing that would make that man that nervous was a full-on meltdown, so they weren't sticking around either. His daughter lived and is now a successful engineer, so they still find the story funny. To answer all the questions I'm getting in one go, she did have meningitis and was extremely ill, but pulled through completely unexpectedly. This was Ireland, early 90s, so there was no real protocol or experience for meltdown or severe chemical spills. They obviously had extensive training, but no one genuinely expected it. Bonus fun facts about the story: the guy's nickname before all this was Turbo. This was a joke because this guy only stood up for lunch. These were not fit young, college-aged men. They were all in their 30s or 40s, used to sitting down and doing very little hands-on work with the substances. Think a dozen or so Homer Simpsons sprinting to their cars, Homer being my dad's hard-earned nickname. A few of them did drive him to the hospital so that he didn't have to worry about parking. They also brought the girl, her sister, and her family teddy bears and basic necessities while they were staying in hospital so that they were comfortable. They named a new protocol after her. It deals with emergency evacuation procedures. It's a serious procedure, but the naming was a deliberate joke by upper management. They even brought her in when she was about 2 to do an honorary ribbon-cutting type thing. When someone asks to speak with you somewhere else rather than just to tell you immediately. My former boss always did this, like, "Ted, we need to talk. Can you come to my conference room, pal?" I'd anxiously go in there. "Ted, you still have vacation days left from last year. Please find 3 days to take them in the next 3 months or they expire." That went in a very different direction than most interactions where the boss asks to speak to you discreetly. Happy for you, the rest of us should maintain vigilance when those fateful words are uttered. A work-based warning sign? Once they stop doing the fringe benefits. The biggest warnings is usually the free coffee. Once that goes away, it's done. The free coffee never went away, however, everyone in middle management, the holiday party, quarterly dividends, retirement, 401k match, overtime, hourly production bonuses, raises, morale, leisure environment, vice presidents, half-hour department, overtime pay after 5 hours for drivers and messengers, promotions, breaks, branch meetings, and monthly practice ammo. I'm sure I've left some things out. Overall, it was an interesting ride. Gotta love giving back to their shareholders. If you are having an argument on the street and the guy's friends slowly work their way behind you, that's a bad sign. It's about to go south. When the ones in senior management with a conscience start saying things like, "It's always a good habit to keep your resume current," or, "I hear the job market is really strong right now." I had a buddy printing off his letter of resignation at work. His immediate manager walked into the room and caught a glimpse of what it was. He told him that he should probably just hang on to that and give it to him at the end of the day. Really emphasized end of day. HR called him a couple of hours later and laid him off with a year's pay. You get that strange watery feeling in the back of your throat, the universal "I'm about to hurl" feeling. That's your saliva production increasing to protect the lining of your esophagus from the acids in your stomach. It's an automatic reaction that's a prelude to vomiting. It's a pretty bad sign when the locals all clear out. When the drunk bloke you're having an argument with takes a good long look at your shoes, I can guarantee you he's gonna sucker punch you. Bonus points if you suddenly get a tingly feeling in your stomach. When you're doing the deed and someone says, "Uh-oh," probably not what you meant, but I can confirm. With 2 young kids, hearing "uh-oh" from the other room when my wife and I are doing it is the biggest mood killer and panic inducer there is. When they want the money before the substances, you're screwed. It's Monday, and as you enter work, there are several security guards stationed in the hallway from a company you don't recognize. Your boss tells you to stay in your cubicle until instructed to show up to the conference room, sorted by alphabet. Not everybody is called. Bonus, when you get to the conference room, you have to turn in your work badge to an armed guard to gain access. People wanted closure. Well, this was a layoff that happened at IBM in 1992 to a friend of mine. They laid off about 90% of the office. Those left were relocated to other campuses. 1. You were called into the conference room. You surrendered your badge, got alerted with a bunch of people you were to be let go. 2. Got a severance package. You signed forms, don't talk to coworkers, the press, among others, and you got 1 copier box. 3. You had 15 minutes to fill said copier box with all your personal belongings. And 4. At 15:01, ready or not, the guard grabbed you and escorted you to your car. You had to leave immediately. Some guards actually physically dragged some people out like bouncers. Like old women and everything. One guy worked with the IBM and NASA moon landing team, been with Big Blue for 30 to 35 years. He couldn't fill all his pictures, awards, and all his stuff in 15 minutes, and certainly not in a copier box. He was escorted out. His stuff, like signed prints from astronauts, models of the LEM, were thrown in the dumpster, but some fellow co-workers saved most of it and gave it back to him. It was seriously an absolute cluster frick. My friend in her 50s was sobbing and shaking from the experience. If you see someone showing signs of the FAST, F. facial drooping, A. arm weakness, S. slurred speech, and T. time, pretty much means the person is having a stroke. You should call 911, because there is a 3 to 4.5 hour window that a stroke person can have a clot buster alteplase, which could end up giving patients most of their normal functions. When someone goes inside their house to get something in the middle of an argument. Alternatively, when someone goes outside to get something from their car in the middle of an argument. The sky turns green. The 3 times I've been in the area where the sky has turned really green, things have not gone well at all. Been through 2 sets of 1.5-inch hail, rain so hard you couldn't see past the windshield, and a wind that would have knocked a tornado over. I'll sit and watch thunderstorms roll in with lightning and thunder, but when things go green, I retreat. In England, someone saying, "Right," especially if it's said as they're getting out of their seat. When you put oxygen on someone and it doesn't change their blood oxygen level. Also, when a previously alert and oriented person suddenly gets confused and/or belligerent, things are about to go south fast. We need to talk. Whenever I hear this, I immediately think, oh crap. Every time I've had a bad conversation with a girl, it's always started with those very words. When you hear those words, things aren't about to go south, it's far too late and you're already doomed. Those 4 words in that order are orders of magnitude scarier than any other way of putting it. Can I have a word? Can I talk to you? And we have something to discuss are all intimidating, but none of them hold the same level of bowel-watering, ominous threat of emotional destruction as we need to talk. When you start feeling rumblings in your stomach and no bathroom around. I try to never be too far from a bathroom. When the animals freak the F out. My grandma's dog actually herded me into the basement right before an earthquake hit when I was a kid. Kelsey was a good dog. Basement is maybe a strong word, downstairs of a split level, so the downstairs is partially underground. Downstairs and upstairs have been lauded as more or less a matter of where you are when the earthquake hits, if the house is well made. But getting away from fally stuff and windows is important. So I feel safe knowing that Kelsey pushing me into getting under the pool table downstairs instead of under Grandma's china hutch upstairs was not her secretly trying to murder me. Tripping me on the stairs would have been a better way to go for that, and she was a smart dog. When upper management start leaving the company, and when they hand out last checks and ask you to stick around for the going away party, ditch the party and cash your check immediately. Do not pass go, nothing. They're worried about a run on payroll because they don't have enough for everyone and they're hoping the party will make you forget that their check will bounce. Experienced it twice in the 2000 and 2001 crash. If you're in a boat on the water and your hair starts to stand up on its own, get to land immediately. You're the highest point on a flat lake, and that is the telltale sign of static charge. Lightning is imminent, and you are the lightning rod. This happened to my family some years ago. We were fishing, it was cloudy, and a storm was an hour or so out, when suddenly all of our hair started to stand up. My dad, mum, and brother all thought it was cool and weird. I was the only one who was concerned, and I didn't know why, and said we should go back to land. They didn't listen, but apparently I put up enough of a fight that we did get off the lake. A few hours later, my parents told my brother's science teacher about that, and his eyes got wide. He said had we not left when we did, we were very likely to have been struck. When the shoreline retreats back a mile into the sea. Where I live, that's how far it goes when the tide goes out. However, as a geologist, I think it's my duty to say that not all tsunamis do this, and most tsunamis have several waves, often with the 3rd or 4th waves being the strongest. If you live in an earthquake-prone area with a tsunami risk, don't simply rely on this or animals. Pay attention to local and international tsunami warnings. A 2-foot tsunami in Hawaii lifted a train and carried it 100 meters. Don't mess around with these things. When those little oxygen masks drop out of the ceiling. Yeah, especially if you're not on an airplane. When your captain is wearing a life jacket. When the DM says, roll initiative, but no one's around except you guys. Whenever you fail a roll that the DM asks for out of the blue, stuff's going to go very badly. Go ahead and roll perception. Oh, alright, 4. Alright, so there's nothing out of the ordinary, so you guys set up camp like normal. 3 minutes later, all of my friends are dead and half my butt is inside a dragon. You're pulled over. You hand the officer your license and registration. He goes back to the car. 2 more cop cars pull over next to you and 1 is a K9 unit. When it's 3 a.m. at IHOP and a drunk dude walks in and starts yelling at a woman who is eating pancakes with another man. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When the redneck says, "F that, I'm getting out of here," like rats on a sinking ship, follow the redneck. If he ain't having it, there's no way you can handle it. When you're in a relationship and someone starts their sentence with, "You always," in the middle of an argument, you aren't necessarily beyond the point of no return, but you are treading deadly water. 3 things. 1. No animals or insects in sight. 2. No wind whatsoever. Everything is still. 3. The night is quieter than the dead. It's like time froze. A huge hurricane is coming your way. Get in your car and scram. Yeah, in case you missed the week-long announcements about the storm that's been moving through the Caribbean Isles, people sandbagging their doorways, no bottled water being available, or cans of food on the shelves, your friends talking about the storm, or boards being put up on every shop window, that's when you look for animals and insects being gone, so that you know a Category 4 or 5 hurricane is barreling down on your butt. When you're just trying to buy a gosh darn kebab after a night on the town and some bro takes his shirt off for no apparent reason right there in that fine establishment because he thinks someone bumped into him on purpose, and according to the bro code, he now has to fight someone to the death because of reasons. And even with the audible sigh from literally everyone in the surrounding, tired and hungry crowd, he simply does not take the gosh darn hint that everyone is giving him to just chill already. The pilot tells the flight attendants to sit down, or when the flight attendants look worried. They know the difference between regular turbulence and holy crap turbulence, or an actual problem that you should be scared of. Yep, I love those flights where things begin to get a little bit bumpy and you see the flight attendants walk briskly down the aisle staring straight ahead with looks of utter seriousness on their faces. Nothing like it for stirring the panic. When the weather gets really beautiful, you've got a good chunk of money in the bank and your car has 0 problems. He turns his hat back in the midst of battle. When they close the doors and start to play The Rains of Castamere. Minnesotan here, when you hear a train when there's no train around, chances are you're going to start seeing trees flying within minutes. Here's a few of mine. An angry person starts saying, "If you don't," or "I swear I'm about to," they're warning you to back off, they're about to lose their temper. When you have 15 missed calls from a parent. When you hear voices getting louder and louder and louder. Alternatively, when a previously loud person suddenly goes silent or doesn't laugh at your joke. I think it was Dimitri Martin that said something like, "Adults aren't allowed to climb trees. If you see some kids in a tree, you don't think twice. But if you see adults in a tree, you think, I don't know what's going on here, but I need to get in a fricking tree now." When your highest-ranking general crosses the Rubicon with a large army. I have a run of good luck, surefire sign things are about to go bad. That just happened to me. Finally took a nice vacation after years, came back feeling great, and a week later, I was fired. They cancel more plans than usual with differing excuses, and they start to ignore you without warning. If there are 2 Jan Michael Vincents in one quadrant. Tornado sirens at night usually mean it's going to be a long evening. When your teacher has a smug look on their face and says, "Put away your notes, class," you can look around the room and see the fear in our eyes because nobody has studied for a pop quiz. Or if you hear a loud, obnoxious voice behind you saying, "Oh my god, is that you, blank? It's been such a long time." When the angry guy who got kicked out of the party goes out to his car and then walks back in all calm. Get the F out of there because he's about to start shooting. You're in a canoe down the river and banjo music starts playing. Jim Cantor of the Weather Channel shows up. When she puts her hair back with a hair tie. Wait, I might be thinking about something else. 3 things. When a folding chair is thrown into a crowd. When shots are fired, or when she says, "We need to talk." 1. Angry crowds. In Afghanistan, we were clearing out IEDs and I was in a vantage point to cover my bomb squad and the rest of our unit. I turned around to grab something from my bag and this large crowd was out of my hearing range, but I could see the swarm going down the streets, gathering more people as it progressed. I signaled my guys to pack it up. We got out just in time. Our APC was Molotoved as it was leaving. All that because of an earlier event where an IED went off and hurt some people. It wasn't even our team or even our country, but it didn't matter. And 2, maybe it's a trick of the mind, but stuff tends to slow right the frick down and a weird silence drops. That feeling is fricking terrifying. Faster flowing water. Conspicuous overconsumption. The housing bubble was the most recent example of this. People getting into mortgages and houses they couldn't afford. The dot-com bust before that was rife with startups that slung money like Elvis slung pink convertibles. When the patient says they're gonna die, a sense of impending doom is a bad sign. Stuff is about to go down south. Not today is what I usually say, and sometimes I'm right. I once heard a story from a doctor quite similar to that. He said that patients screaming and saying that they're going to die usually don't. He said one patient he had suddenly went quiet, leaned back into his seat and glassed over. The doctor said that's when you get that sense of impending doom that just makes you go cold. All the staff in the room went from, okay, let's get this guy patched up, to, oh frick. You're the manager of a store. You open at 10 a.m. As you open your gates at 10 a.m., the phone rings at 10:01 a.m. You pick up the phone and before you begin your usual spiel, thank you for calling Superstore and the caller starts with the word, look. When the calmest, most reasonable dude who is never worried gets worried. Yep, as a somewhat anxious human being, this is very true. The rest of us look to the chill guys and gals in our lives as a barometer for how screwed we're about to be. I just think it's funny how it's never funny. When your Reinhard swaps to a Hanzo. When a herd of animals are headed towards higher ground, it's probably a good idea to follow them. When your grandmother, who's been living with stage 4 cancer for the past 2 months, says she realizes the pain will be ending soon because her oncologist at this point isn't sugarcoating how long she has anymore. The fact she also says she's tired of hurting and ready for the hurting to stop cements the reality of the fragility of life and how important simply treasuring other people is. Love as much and as hard as you can. Sincerely, a sad grandson. When one of my idiot friends says, hold my beer. When Coca-Cola pulls distribution of its product in an area. When mid-level management is bailing en masse. When you're out drinking with your buddies and you run into a girl that had history with 2 of the guys. Saturday night for us reached south in record time. Don't forget to scrub your accounts, kiddos. Wouldn't want anything of value falling into the hands of the shareholders. When your coworker starts getting the attitude of, I do everything around here. They get the martyr complex going. I'm the only person who can do that. You guys would be lost without me. This person is making it known that their morale at work is bad, and bad morale is contagious. I was that guy. I got fired. Best lesson I ever learned. No one is irreplaceable. Went on to management. Shared that story a few times instead of firing employees that may have deserved it. It also gave me the confidence to fire top performers that deserve to be fired. No one is irreplaceable. When your floor manager clocks in and every day says, is it 5:30 yet? No, dude, it's not. You get paid twice as much as I do and you're literally destroying the morale of everyone on the floor under you. When a Marine says, that is stupid and I want no part of it, and leaves. When every dog in the neighborhood starts barking like crazy. My sign that things are about to go south? 1. Go to the North Pole. 2. Take a step in any direction. When you've been drinking a lot and you have to keep spitting, you're about to hurl up. The character who always has his eyes closed opens his eyes. I'd like you to meet Sanjay. He's visiting from our facility in India, and I'd like you to show him how to do your job. As a nurse and healthcare professional, when your patient tells you that something just feels wrong, or they feel like they're going to die, stuff's about to go south real fast. Case in point, my little old lady patient called me into her room the other night and said that she was nervous and needed to pray, then proceeded to do the sign of the cross. I noped out of there so fast and called her doctor to tell her they needed to see her now. Sure enough, she coded about 15 minutes later. When Dad is going to get ice cream and nothing else. That's always bad news. Your mom and I are getting a divorce. Sparky got out somehow, and we won't be going to see your grandma anymore. When the music changes. You're in a bar, and some guy looking crazy comes in the door. He looks around and locks his eye on a couple and yells, "What the frick are you doing with my wife?" When the weather starts getting colder and you look up into the sky only to see a large flock of birds that happen to be traveling in one specific direction. When you turn up to a job interview and the interviewer is holding a video camera and you're asked to sit on a black leather couch. Well, for my coworkers, it's usually me saying, "We need to leave now." Anytime I've left, there was something that happened, such as a cleaning detail, higher-ranking people coming into our shop and getting angry for no reason, uniform inspections, or any number of stupid military stuff. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.